special meeting. Today is October 22nd, 2024. We are in the Katie Dorset Council Chamber. Let the record reflect that Councilwoman Tammy Thurm is attending via Zoom and Mrs. Hoffman is absent this evening. We will begin tonight's meeting with a moment of silence. Thank you. Dr. Wells, would you lead us in the pledge? The Greensboro City Council encourages resident input. Public participation is of the utmost importance to the City Council. It is the goal that residents feel empowered to bring issues of concern before their elected officials. Individuals may sign up to speak to our business item today. We only have one item. Please sign up to speak by 6 o'clock. The order in which speakers are called will be in the order in which they've signed up. Each speaker will be allotted 3 minutes. Speakers shall be civil and courteous in their language and presentation. Insults, profanity, use of vulgar language or gestures, or other inappropriate behaviors are not allowed. Speakers are to address council during the public comment period. Speakers shall not address or respond to members of the audience. All speaker handouts should have been provided to the city clerk or courier to be distributed to council. The City of Greensboro is committed to promoting an environment that is free of discrimination, bias, and bullying. Therefore, speakers shall refrain from personal attacks. The mayor or presiding officer has the authority to interpret and enforce the rules of decorum. In order to maintain a safe space for all speakers, members of the audience or speakers from the podium who intentionally disrupt the meeting, engage in egregious or repeated violations, or ridicule other speakers will be given a warning, and if unheeded, they will be removed from the meeting. That person will be suspended from in-person participation for 3 months. In order to preserve their right to free speech, they can attend virtually by Zoom, by phone, or submit comments via email. All electronic devices should be turned off or to the silent mode. If you must make or receive a phone call, kindly do so from outside the chamber. Zoom participants shall mute their microphones until they are called upon to speak. All meeting attendees, including Zoom participants, are expected to respect speakers and council deliberations. This meeting does include closed captioning. Depending on the length of tonight's meeting, we may take a short recess around 7:30. We'll now move to our general business agenda. We have one item, which is E1, a resolution to support one of the 2 resolution options for remediation of Bingham Park and the former Hampton School site. I think we'll start with a staff presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and members of council, staff from our Parks and Recreation Department, also our Office of Sustainability and Resilience, also representatives and a contractor from our North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. They're all here tonight to provide a presentation to update you on remediation options for Bingham Park. We all know that for the last several years, this team has worked diligently to explore options to address the soil contaminations that were presented at Bingham Park, as well as the former Hampton Elementary School site. This has included robust community engagement with our communities that are in the area. We're also grateful for all the community members who have taken time, who've been involved, but also taken time to come out tonight. In a moment, I will talk about that process for them to speak to you. I also want to take a moment to emphasize that our ongoing commitment to balance the quality of life and the safety and health of all of our residents In recent years, we have witnessed significant growth and investment in our community. We believe that a thriving community is one where opportunity coexists with a high quality of life. What you will hear tonight from our presenters and ultimately decide on has the potential to impact future investment of housing, health and wellness, resources, recreation amenities, and the connectivity that involves both sites that will be a transformational effect in East Greensboro. All of which we hope to achieve is our opportunity and our desire for the community, this community, and all of our city. In a moment, I'll turn it over to Director Fleischman, who will begin the presentation. Following his presentation, you will hear from our other members of our team, our staff, and the NCDEQ will address council, also address questions related to the information that you'll see. And then members of our community, the public who have signed up, will have an opportunity to address council on their perspectives. We envision that tonight, council will listen to the speakers, discuss those things that have been brought before you, and we're seeking direction for the future of this project. So I'll turn it over to Director Fleischman.
Thank you, Manager Davis. Good evening, Mayor Vaughn, Mayor Pro Tem Johnson, members of the City Council, and community members who have joined this evening. I'm Phil Fleischman, Director of the Parks and Recreation Department for the city, and our team is here tonight in order to provide an update and to receive direction regarding remediation options at Bingham Park, including the site of the former William M. Hampton Elementary School. So some of what we do tonight is kind of go into detail for those of you and members of the public who have been following our exploration into options and in public forums that you've been to. You may have heard some of this information before, and that's okay. We kind of want to back up and give you a really complete picture of where we are and how we got to this point. Bingham Park is a 12-acre property that's located in East Greensboro along South English Street between East Market Street and McConnell Road. Prior to its closure, it served residents in the Cottage Grove, East Side Park, and Willow Oaks neighborhoods and beyond. An incinerator and a pre-regulatory landfill operated on the property before the park was built here in the 1970s. The park has been fenced off and is currently closed to all users due to testing which revealed soil contamination due to the incinerator and landfill on the site. Across English Street from Bingham Park, the city acquired the former Hampton School site or school property from Guilford County Schools in 2023. There is a portion of that property which is also contaminated and will receive remediation through this project as well. Sharing in tonight's presentation from Parks and Recreation, we have myself as well as Kobe Riley, Deputy Director, and from our Office of Sustainability and Resilience, we have Richard Lovett, Environmental Compliance and Support Manager. Jerry Paul with S&ME, a technical advisor to the State Department of Environmental Quality, whose firm completed testing on the properties and has provided cost estimates for the options outlined, will also share in the presentation. And then we have Brian Wright, Ryan Chanel, and Bill Hunnicky from the State Department of Environmental Quality here as well to address questions which might relate to pre-regulatory landfill remediation at this or other locations. Tom Raymond has also joined us with S&ME. The DEQ has purview and addresses pre-regulatory landfills across the state, and they will be able to respond to questions that you may have related to remediation practices, safety, and more, and we appreciate them being here with us tonight. So, what are we covering? A history of Bingham Park property, details on the testing results, cleanup options, health and safety precautions that are taken during remediation, information related to why we're bringing this to you now, why we want to have this discussion and receive direction from you, and then finally a summary of the two resolutions that Manager Davis mentioned, which are included in your packets, known as Option A Resolution and Option B Resolution. I want to say that getting to this point has been a really great collaboration involving staff, the state, the Bingham Park Environmental Justice Team, many of whom are in the audience here tonight. We want to update the council. We want you all, just as we have received extensive feedback, we want you all also to be able to receive that feedback, and we're seeking your direction on how we should move forward. At the end of this presentation, as Manager Davis mentioned, we will address questions that the council has related to what we've presented, and then we envision speakers from the floor having that opportunity, and then from there, council discussion would likely ensue, is kind of what we're thinking as far as the flow for this evening. So with that said, to provide a review of the history of the park property, I'd like to turn this over to Kobe Riley, Deputy Parks and Rec Director.
Thank you, Phil. Good evening. The history of this project starts in the 1920s. I'll call your attention to the photos on the slides. These images depict the origin of the incinerator that was placed on the property. Articles show and discuss where a meeting was held in June of 1923. 100 years to the day of that meeting, myself and several individuals in this room tonight were on a meeting still talking about this topic. The incinerator was in operation from the 1920s to the 1950s. The operation ceased in the 50s. In 1960 to 1970, the community wanted a park. Bingham Park was established. It operated as a neighborhood park and community hub from the 1970s to the 2010s. Moving to the 2010s, current Deputy City Manager Wilson and Assistant City Manager McCrae were then Park and Recreation Director and Planning Division Manager, respectively. They saw this basketball court was cracking and sinking and identified that settling was unordinary. They initiated contact with NCDEQ, who identified this as a pre-regulatory landfill. So we fast forward to the 2020s. So much has happened in the last 4 years. We established a partnership with the Bingham Park Environmental Justice Team. From 2020 to 2024, this group and city staff and others met on a bi-monthly basis routinely, late hours, early mornings, whenever necessary, to discuss this project. Due in large part to the efforts of Councilwoman Hightower, City Council, Greensboro City Council, Guilford County delegation, city staff, and community support, funding was identified, requested, negotiated, and received. We are the closest we've ever been to seeing this project completed. From 2023 to now, there have been at least 5 public meetings regarding this project, no fewer than 225 attendees, with 18 landfill tours and 100 plus attendees on those tours. I will now pass it over to Mr. Jerry Paul from SME, who will explain the findings from the investigation and his firm has done under the direction of NCDEQ.
Thanks, Kobe. My name is Gerald Paul. I'm the Senior Environmental Project Manager with SME, and we work for the Pre-Regulatory Landfill Unit. Over the next 2 slides, I'm going to give you a brief summary of the waste that's located at the park and the Hampton School property, and then I'm going to go through a brief summary. A brief summary of the investigations that were done by media type. So first, to cover the Bingham Park property is broken up into 2 distinct areas that contain waste. Over those 2 areas, they contain approximately 206,000 cubic yards of waste with an average thickness of 10.5 feet and a maximum thickness of 27 feet. And that equates to approximately 13,700 dump trucks of waste. And that's based on approximately 22 tons per truckload. So that's just a quantity size. The former Hampton Road School property is approximately 3.1 acres, and it's made up of those two smaller areas. And they contain approximately 18,000 cubic yards of waste with a thickness of a half a foot down to 12 feet thick. And that equates to approximately 1,200 truckloads of material. This next slide briefly summarizes the remedial investigations that were completed under the pre-regulatory landfill guidance. The waste disposal area itself was fully delineated for both parcels. I'm going to go through these by media type. So first I'll cover the surface water. Surface water samples were collected adjacent to and downstream of the waste disposal area that makes up the site. The samples were collected upstream at the site as well later in our investigations. Lead was not detected in the surface water samples that were collected. Elevated concentrations of metals were identified in the adjacent samples, but elevated concentrations were also identified upstream from the Bingham Park itself. Concentrations detected were consistent with what we generally find in urban settings. Next, we covered groundwater. So during the groundwater investigation, samples were collected from monitor wells that were in and around the park site. Elevated levels of lead were also not identified in the groundwater samples. Concentrations of other metals were identified within the site, but were also identified up gradient of the landfill itself. Groundwater sampling results also indicated concentrations similar to those found in similar urban areas. Next, landfill gases that are usually associated with these pre-regulatory landfills. We installed 10 landfill gas probes in and around the site. They were screened for volatile organic compounds, methane, and other landfill gases. The gas probe screening did not indicate human health concerns. Next, we moved on to the soil cover. Soil cover is the material that's above the waste itself. We installed 63 sample grids across the waste disposal areas. 49 of those samples had waste either at or just below the surface. Next, the waste itself, and that's the material below the soil cover. That's the waste characterization. We had elevated concentrations of lead were identified in samples across the site at concentrations that constitute an immediate health risk. Other metals and semi-volatile organic compounds were also identified at concentrations that do not constitute an immediate health risk. And I'm going to come back in a few minutes and cover some of the health and safety concerns. Pass it off to Phil.
So now that we've fully explored these sites through testing, the question is, what do we do about it? We've been working over the past few years with the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality and the community to identify options. Our goal here is twofold: ensuring the safety of area residents and developing a park. Both of the options that we're presenting tonight as option A and option B do both. You might recognize some of the presentation materials, as I've said, as we've been holding or attending public meetings most of this year. The cost estimates that we had, though, were over 2 years old, so we asked for and received new updated cost estimates from the Department of Environmental Quality a few weeks ago, and you see those here on your screen. At that time, we asked for a modification to the original cost estimates in terms of the plan for option A, and you see that depicted here. So what are option A and option B? Kofi's going to go into more details with you regarding each option, but essentially with option A, Bingham Park will be remediated with a containment and cover system which allows for the installation of nature trails for connectivity. Park amenities would be limited after that, and because of that, we asked to add the potential of full remediation of contaminated areas of the former Hampton School site so that we can still develop a fully functional and active park serving the community. It's important that we provide that access to parks. This option is viable in that it addresses safety per the NCDEQ, and it is an acceptable way to remediate. It is an option that the city has funding to do now. Remember, at the beginning of this journey, Hampton School was a functioning school and owned by Guilford County Schools, and that's before the tornado that came through in 2018 destroyed Hampton School and it went offline. The transfer of the Hampton School property to the city makes this option A a possibility. The cost of this option is $12.4 million, and that includes the containment with Nature Trail at Bingham and full remediation with a park at Hampton. Option B calls for the full...
Let me ask you a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Where this is done in other places, this option A, what has been the results? I want people to hear. I know.
So one thing that we'll do is go into more details on option A, Mayor Pro Tem, because we think it's important that we provide details about what does this really mean.
Okay.
So we will be providing that information.
That's fine.
And we'll also talk about other communities that have done that as well. Now, with option B calls for full remediation of both the Bingham Park and Hampton School property by using Great Oak or Uwharrie landfill as the waste disposal locations. This option would allow these properties to be fully redeveloped without limitations, and specifically, a neighborhood park would be reestablished at Bingham, and the potential of some sort of mixed-use opportunity could be pursued at Hampton, determined through future council consideration. The cost of this option ranges from $41.3 million to $43.4 million, depending on the waste disposal location that's utilized. Option B is the community's desired option, and it would remove all of the waste on both properties. Kobe is going to share more specifics about community support for this option, and I also want to highlight that the council has received 2 petitions in support of this option, with approximately 120 names signed to it as of 4:30 p.m. today. Now, there's a third box there that's X'd out, and that is an option of using White Street landfill. And this is no longer being considered as a waste disposal location for this project after receiving extensive feedback during and outside of the public meetings and engagements that we've held to date. Significant concerns related to the potential of White Street landfill were raised, and so that option is no longer one that is being considered, and that's why you see it X'd out on your screen here. Now, as I promised, we're going to get into more details of both option A and B, what each could mean, and for that, I'll turn it back over to Kobe.
Thank you. As Phil shared, I get to expound on the options. Since we started this in 2020, we've been having earnest conversations ongoing with the community, NCDEQ, about the project and the remediation options. The next few slides will detail the options currently available. So the first being containment and cover. This is a permanent solution. This option protects the health, safety of residents, preventing exposure to the contaminated soil. You'll notice on the screen, I won't read all the bullet points, but those are bullets that highlight some of the features that this option contains. Through required maintenance, this is a permanent solution. This option would allow Bingham Park to be a passive recreation park and allow connectivity to Bingham Street to English Street, and a new park to be formed at the former Hampton School site. Because the containment cover system, this limits the type of amenities that can go back on the Bingham Park property. There are 3 restrictions mainly, and those are, first, we cannot add amenities that the community has asked for because of the anchoring in the coverage isn't allowed to penetrate the ground within 12 inches. Second, the topography of Bingham Park makes it non-compliant with the ADA Act because the park sits on a hill. The grade is actually subject to increase with the cap and cover system, the containment and cover system, and so therefore we can't add amenities to Bingham Park as they would not be accessible for those with disabilities. However, a nature trail is not subject to the accessibility rules, and so that would still be an available option for the public. And finally, a slab on this construction can't be done because, if you recall from the first pictures that really initiated this kickoff, where DCM Wilson and ACM McCrae walked on where the park had the slope, you can't put a slab there because continuous settling would take place. All right, so this is what the option could look like. Option A, this is just for illustrative purposes. You'll notice that the walking trails are present. There could be some plantings. This would be pretty much just for passive recreation use, and then the park amenities are to the right at the former Hampton School site. And again, while this option does have restrictions, it's not a Band-Aid. It is a solution that has been utilized in other communities across the state. This option meets the major objectives that were cited, protecting the health and safety of residents and building a park that the neighborhood deserves and desires. With this option, Bingham Park property will be a passive green space, and as we stated before, a portion of Hampton School site will be a fully functional park. Without the acquisition of Hampton School site, initially in our conversations, we felt like there was no way to add a park to the community, but once the acquisition took place, this became an option that could be realized. If this option was selected, the city would be responsible for maintaining the system in perpetuity. It does not preclude the city at some later date of pursuing full remediation. However, that would be a decision that council in the future would have to make, and it would come with its own decisions and options at that point in time. This is what the containment system and the containment cover looks like. Essentially, there will be this visual display of the cover system shows a geotextile barrier that is placed on top of the contaminated soil. Then 12 inches of cover soil is placed on top of the geotextile barrier, and then finally grass is established. This prevents the primary method of exposure, the only method of exposure really, to the public, and allows for it to be a safe and viable option. So, Mayor Pro Tem, this slide really depicts what you were asking about a few moments earlier, is communities throughout the state that have utilized various methods of containment and cover. Greensboro is not alone in this situation. There are over 100 of pre-regulatory landfills throughout the state. This slide from NCDEQ shows some of those sites across the state using various methods of cap and contain. You may identify on this slide that some locations have things like softball fields and baseball fields. It's worth noting again that ours, we would not be able to because of the topography that presents with Bingham Park. And so ours would not allow for those things to take place in addition to the penetration of the soil. Full remediation. This option directly came as a result of ongoing conversations with the Bingham Park Environmental Justice Team and the community at large. This option satisfies the goals of health and safety. This option is a permanent solution. This option would allow for full redevelopment of Bingham Park and the former Hampton School site. This is the preferred option of the Bingham Park Environmental Justice Team and is supported by the Park and Recreation Commission through an official vote in February of 2023. This image depicts a fully redeveloped park and what it could look like. Through community engagement efforts in the 2020s, the neighborhood has expressed exactly what they want, and they've said they want what every community has and what they want: trails for walking and connectivity, picnic shelters for gathering, a playground for children, basketball court and fitness stations for everyone. All this can be achieved with full remediation. In addition, both of these can be achieved with full remediation in option A or option B and partial remediation in option A. The topography would not be a problem as the park would be at street level, thereby allowing us add any desired options through ADA. If this option is selected, the former Hampton School site can be redeveloped, as Phil mentioned, without any restrictions for any suitable purposes. I'll now hand it over to Richard Lovett to discuss landfill options.
Good evening. So with either of the two options that were presented here, there is going to be some disposal of material, whether it be 1,800 cubic yards from the remediation to Hampton School or the 206,000 cubic yards if full remediation is chosen. So disposal needs to go to a properly lined permitted landfill. So the City of Greensboro investigated all potential landfills within 75-mile radius of Bingham Park based on financial limitations to go beyond that. And we used a criteria to determine what landfills could actually accept the waste. Of the 9 landfills identified, only 3 were eligible to take the waste, one of which has been removed from consideration tonight, and that is White Street. That leaves 2 options, meaning Great Oak landfill in Ashboro, where the city currently takes their municipal solid waste, and Uwharrie landfill located in Troy. So why was White Street removed? Well, as Director Fleischman said, there was a lot of public input as to regarding concerns and about utilizing White Street for the disposal, and staff is acknowledging that sensitivity and that concern. So for the purposes of this presentation, we're looking at two disposal options, meaning Great Oak and Uwharrie. Now, Great Oak is located in Ashboro. It's about 26 miles from here. If the material is to be taken to Great Oak, it will take approximately 14 plus months to complete the remediation. Either option is about the same length of time based on DEQ's cost estimates. So whether it's the cap and cover option A with the full removal at Hampton or the full removal at both parcels, the estimate that was provided to us says that it will be approximately 14 plus months. The cost for this option, taking it to Great Oak, is estimated to be $41.3 million. That represents roughly a $23 million funding shortfall. We also considered Uwharrie landfill in Troy. This is a much greater distance. It's about 76 miles one way. Again, 14 plus months to complete. This estimate is about $43.4 million, or a funding shortfall of $25 plus million. The increase in cost is primarily driven by the distance that the material would have to be transported to the landfill. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to S&ME to talk about some safety concerns.
Thanks, Richard.
I've been asked to generally discuss the health and safety requirements that will take place during construction and that will be implemented. Regardless of the selected remedy, the health and safety of the site workers and the public is a primary concern. One of the main things that we'll do regardless of a site is we put together a site-specific health and safety plan that outlines the risks that are involved in working with this material to not only protect the site workers but the general public as well. In addition to what we typically do for one of our remedial projects, for this project specifically, we'll implement a dust monitoring and control plan. That plan will be put together by a certified industrial hygienist, and that plan will address concerns associated with lead and asbestos in the soil. In addition, in part of that plan, the work ambient air monitoring requirements and action levels will also be assigned. So there'll be certain thresholds that will be put in place to monitor during construction, action levels, action thresholds once they're crossed for immediate response to be taken. And in addition to that, constant air monitoring samples will be collected around the perimeter of the site, both for lead and asbestos.
Okay, so to kind of tie all of this together, you may be wondering, why are we bringing this to you now when we've been working on this for several years now? The city has identified $18.05 million in external funds in order to be able to move forward with this project. And you see the specific amounts or funding sources there on the slide before you. $7 million of that $18.05 million is able to come from the Department of Environmental Quality's pre-regulatory landfill fund, and they've pledged $7 million towards this project. A part of both resolutions for option A and B looks at the city allocating a portion of $11 million from State House Bill 259 that's to be allocated for Bingham Park as well as downtown remediation. And so both of these resolutions as drafted have a figure of $10 million of that $11 million that would be allocated through council action. So that adds another 10, and then we have $1.05 million from a federal appropriations bill, and that's how we arrive at this figure of $18.05 million for the project. So now we have updated cost estimates, and we also have kind of more clear information related to external funding for this project. So because of this, we've never been closer than now to be able to move forward with completing this project. I should say with these external funds, a condition of receiving them is there are dates of reversion or dates by which monies go back if they're not earmarked or allocated for the project, used for the project. So that's mid-2026 for State House Bill 259 funding and 2032 for the federal funding. So it is important to share those dates with you as well because that certainly is a consideration. I want to say that we wouldn't be at this point without the advocacy of Councilmember Hightower for this project, and also support that's been garnered at the state level, largely through North Carolina State Senator Gladys Robinson, and at the federal level through U.S. Congresswoman Kathy Manning. And so really it's kind of these collective efforts that have resulted in being able to secure this external funding. Now, the city has not made a financial commitment to this project. Complete park reconstruction costs are not included in the figures that we've given you. What's included there is the remediation based on the strategies that have been proposed. The cost of the park construction, whether it be at Bingham or at Hampton, will be determined through a park master planning effort that will build off of the community engagement at this point, which Kobe talked about, community interest and desires for the park to be constructed. We do envision this being a multi-year project. I believe Mr. Lovett mentioned that the planning phase could take a year to complete, and that's the technical process that has to be done for either option. And so really the city's financial commitment or contribution could potentially be spread out over 2 to 3 future fiscal years, but that would be subject to budgetary action by the current and future councils, which is certainly a consideration as well. One thing that often comes up is, well, aren't there other external funds available to do this? What about designation from the EPA as a brownfield site and things of that nature? And it is important to highlight that because the city owned this site at the time that it was contaminated, what we found is this site is not eligible for many remedial grants, unfortunately. So, we are very pleased to have $18.05 million to work with. That's very significant, and certainly share in the concern that, well, can it be more, or why can't it be more? So that's kind of how we got to this point. Now, as far as kind of a high-level summary of the resolutions, what these slides do is pull out the key points from what the city would take action on if the council chooses to vote on one of these resolutions in support. What does it mean? So with option A, this would be support for remediation by a waste containment and cover system at Bingham Park, and support for full remediation of contaminated areas at the former Hampton school site. It also includes supporting the use of a properly permitted and lined landfill other than the White Street landfill to receive waste from the properties. And you heard about those two options in the presentation tonight. This would authorize the allocation of $10 million of that $11 million that I mentioned to you from State House Bill 259 to support remediation of Bingham Park and Hampton School. This would be the city resolving to express its full support for the construction of a new neighborhood park on a portion of the former Hampton School site, and it would also allow us to move forward with a request for proposals process to get a technical consultant who can work with us to design a remedial action plan for this strategy and preparation of bid documents so that this project could move forward. Option B, summarized, this is the option for full remediation of both properties. So it would be the city supporting full remediation or removal of all contaminated soil at Bingham Park and the future the former Hampton School site, support for using a properly permitted landfill other than White Street landfill to receive the project-specific waste, again authorizing $10 million of the $11 million from the State House bill, committing, this would be the city as a statement of support, committing to finding ways to fund the balance of the full remediation of the properties, expressing its support for construction of a new neighborhood park at Bingham, and then finally, similarly to the other resolution, enabling us to secure a technical consultant, do the remedial action plan for this effort, and then move forward with bidding. So that's kind of a high-level summary of both of the resolutions that are before you this evening. So we've taken probably about 40 minutes of your time to provide this information, and we know it's a lot of information, and you likely have questions, and so that's why we have other members of our team that have worked on this from the state DEQ here as well as staff to be able to address questions you have before we move into public comment, I think.
Thank you. I think we'll move on to public comment. If Cheryl Johnson, Chad Martin, or Kathy Colville are in the audience, please see the courier to confirm your attendance. I'm going to take people in the order in which they were signed up. Our first two speakers are on Zoom. You all have 3 minutes each. Lakeisha Williams.
Yes, hello.
Hello.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay, I need to pull over really quickly.
Yes.
Because I wasn't expecting to speak first, so let me pull over very quickly if that's okay. If you can go to the next person, will that be fine?
Well, I'll call you right after the next person, so get ready.
That sounds fine. Thank you. Oh, I'll be ready.
Josie Williams.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Can you put your camera on?
I tried, but it's saying the host. Okay, there we go.
Okay.
Hello, how are you guys today?
Good. How are you?
Good. I wanted to speak only because not only, but the community asked me to speak, but I also, although I'm not there, I still have strong ties, and I've worked on this project since 2016. And I wanted to voice a heartfelt plea for not only the support for this project, but I understand that the community has its concerns, and I understand that it's been a long fight. And I think that the information that was presented tonight and what I know to have been worked on over the last several years, at one point, Hampton Elementary was not even an option being talked about when we started this work in 2016. And then the tornado comes along, and that changed things. And then at the beginning of this year or last year, the acquisition of the park came into play. So Hampton wasn't a topic of conversation pertaining to this remediation. Now that it is, I think it lends more favorability to having possible 2 locations versus having nothing. And I think it also is very favorable for the community to be able to do something with the land at Hampton. Otherwise, as we know, it may not be another opportunity to come up in the near future for any remediation or anything to do with that property. And so I appreciate the work that Sharon has done. I appreciate the work that those that have worked on this with council, like Kobe, and the work that they've done. And I know that our EJ team has done some work, and I understand that their concerns, but I speak in favor of the remediation that seems fair and practical at this point. And as we can see, with every passing year, every passing day, the cost of what this looks like now could increase in the next 12 months or so. I just wanted to say that I appreciate the work everybody was doing. I understand the the position of both sides, but I just speak in favor of it. And I think that if we don't do something now, we'll have another generation where people have moved on from this community, and we'll have another generation where we'll still have this same conversation, and this money is going to sunset. So if we don't do something now,
30
there,
seconds.
opportunity may not come up again. So I thank you for the support. I thank you for the work that's been done. I understand both positions, but I speak in favor of the practicality of what they are proposing tonight for option A. And unless someone is going to come up with some money to do option B, to the full remediation of $40-some million.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to Lakeisha, but then the
Thank
next
you.
one moment, please. Then the next three speakers, if you could move to the window side of the room, Stephen Sills, Courtney Ulla, and Will Hendrick. Lakeisha, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you for allowing me to get safe, because I was trying to get in a safe location. I allow you pushing that back so I can speak. Again, my name is Lakeisha Williams, and I have been a Greensboro East Greensboro resident for 30 years. And so I want to take a minute to share some of my thoughts. First, I want to say we need to learn to be able to learn from our mistakes. When you look around that room at the city council right now, that city council does not look anything like it did 100 years ago. So that's progress, right? We want to keep moving forward. Also, one thing that we should have learned from our mistakes before is that the city council actually decided to open that incinerator 100 years ago against and did not listen to the voice of the people. There were 300 to 400 people asking, pleading, and desiring not to have that in their community, and the council decided not to listen to the people. So I'm pleading with you to learn from your mistakes and listen to the people tonight. So one thing I think that is so important for us to understand is that this community is built up of people and families, and you cannot really put a dollar amount on that. I had a lot of thoughts that I wanted to share, but I also actively listened to the presentation that was made, and I thought about a few points that I might want to mention. One of the things that I heard was about the option A for partial, for cap and cover, and for the remediation at Hampton Park would be an option that would work. But I want to talk about some problems with that. One of the first problems that I see with that is the fact that that area, it would be capped and covered in the area that you cannot put permanent lights there. It's already a safety problem in that area now. One thing that I heard Kobe mention was about the topology of the area, in which that they couldn't do a lot of things there. He said with the park would be ADA compliant at the Hampton site if they did it. But if we do this nature trail at the park now, where with the option A, and just do cap and cover, that will not be ADA compliant, meaning that people with disabilities would not be able to have access to using that park. They would not have access to walking through those trails. And I think that's really important when we're thinking about the community. We want to think about not just the children, but our elderly people in our community. And so lastly, I would say that you guys as a council learn from your mistakes the last time and listen to the voice of the people, because we are why you are in your seats now. And I yield. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen Sills?
Thank you. Members of the City Council, I urge you to carefully consider this vital issue that impacts the health, safety, and environmental justice of a community that has been marginalized for too long. In 1923, the City of Greensboro made a decision that had far-reaching consequences, placing an incinerator and landfill in a predominantly black farming community, despite clear opposition of its residents. This was a grave mistake, made to save money and appease the majority at the time. But it was a decision that placed an environmental burden on those least able to bear it. Today, you have the opportunity to correct this injustice. I implore you to vote in favor of a full remediation of the landfill site in East Greensboro. The landfill, established nearly a century ago, has left a legacy of contamination that continues to endanger the health of the community. It is not simply cap and waste and walk away. Leaving hazardous materials buried without a permanent and safe solution only perpetuates harm. This is a community already struggling with the challenges of environmental racism. Why should they bear the burden of a century of injustice, refuse from the rest of the city any longer? We know environmental hazards disproportionately affect Black and brown communities across the nation, and East Greensboro is no exception. The presence of contaminations in this landfill has exposed families to toxic materials for decades. It's time for the City of Greensboro to listen to the community concerns and take action to fully remediate the land, restoring it to safe, healthy conditions. Not only should the land be made safe, but it should be transformed into a space that improves the well-being of the neighborhood, a space where residents can gather, exercise, and thrive. We look at other parts of Greensboro. We see that have found creative ways to partner with philanthropy and other organizations to finance substantial investments in public spaces. LeBauer Park received $10 million for just 3.5 acres. City Center Park cost over $12 million. And the Arboretum, Centennial Park, and Bog Garden, as well as the Downtown Greenway, have all received millions in continuous investment. These parks in predominantly white neighborhoods are enjoyed by the entire city. Why then can we not find the resources to restore a park in a historically Black community that has suffered the brunt of environmental racism for generations? The decision before you is not about removing waste from the ground. It's about justice and equity. We cannot talk about progress in Greensboro if we ignore the very communities that have been harmed the most by past policies. We have a chance to make a different sort of choice today, a choice that puts people and their health above cost-cutting and temporary fixes. One of the most concerning aspects of the situation is that it will have an impact on the tree canopy. Option A does not allow for tree cover in 12 acres, which leaves waste in place and further reduces tree canopy in an area already recognized as a heat island. Studies, including those from Smart Surface Coalition, have shown that increasing...
Thank you.
Thank you.
Courtney Ulla?
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed council members, today I stand before you to discuss the urgent matter that impacts not just our present, but the future of our children and our community as a whole. The full remediation of Bingham Park, built on a pre-regulatory landfill. I must address the injustice of treating cap and cover as an acceptable solution. This is not merely a matter of land management. It is about the lives of our families and the health of our children. When we think about our parks, we envision spaces where children can play, families can gather, and communities can thrive. But Bingham Park, with its hidden legacy of contamination, stands as a stark reminder of the negligence that has been inflicted upon us. The cap and cover method may appear to be a quick fix, but it is a temporary measure that fails to address the underlying issues. It's a Band-Aid on a wound that requires thorough healing. We deserve better. Our children deserve better. I want my children and all the children in our community to have a safe place where they can come together, play freely, and create cherished memories without the fear of hidden dangers lurking beneath their feet. Human life and health must always take precedence over monetary values. We cannot allow financial considerations to dictate the safety of our children and the well-being of our community. The value of a child's health is immeasurable, and it cannot be compromised. We've seen new investors come into the area surrounding Bingham Park, unaware of the serious issues tied to what is below the surface, just as my family was unaware when we first moved here. This lack of transparency is not just a disservice to them, it perpetuates a cycle of ignorance that affects all of us. It is crucial that I must raise my voice as a representative of my community and demand accountability from those in power. Unfortunately, those most impacted by this issue often feel overlooked and undervalued by elected officials. We have been promised full support for the complete remediation of Bingham Park, yet those promises are not fulfilled and, worse yet, have been diminished under the shadow of a cheaper solution. I am here, along with other community voices, to hold you, our leaders, accountable and ensure that our voices are heard, because every resident matters and our health and safety should never be secondary. In closing, let us all stand in agreement for the full remediation of Bingham Park. Let us prioritize our children's futures and show the world that the needs of people come before profits, as God intended. Together, we can all create a safe and welcoming environment for generations to come for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. After Will Hendrick, Cheryl Johnson, Chad Martin, Kathy Koval.
Good evening. My name is Will Hendrick, and I'm the Environmental Justice Director for the North Carolina Conservation Network. I'm here today in support of my friends from the Bingham Park Environmental Justice Team to speak in support of Option B, which calls for the full remediation of the soil contamination caused by the long-time operation of an incinerator and an unregulated, pre-regulatory landfill in their community. For years, that community received waste from across Greensboro. The resulting contamination continues to threaten public health, lower property values, and threaten environmental quality. The disparate nature of those impacts on communities of color and low income is what makes this an environmental justice concern. The Greensboro Parks and Recreation Commission voted last year, as you heard, to support full remediation of Bingham Park. I appreciate the subsequent efforts by many on city staff to evaluate options to achieve that selected objective. Earlier this year, flyers prepared for a related community meeting posed the question, why must the waste be removed from Bingham Park? And answered by first noting that staff had determined that removal of all contaminated soil and material is the desired option to address this site. The same document, notably published after the acquisition of the Hampton School site, noted that the surrounding neighborhoods are not able to have a functional park unless the soil is removed, and no amenities in the park can be replaced without addressing the contaminated soil. I am sincerely grateful that the Council is no longer considering taking the contamination from Bingham Park and sending it to White Street landfill. I also note that this doesn't change the fact that the waste must be removed in order for justice to be served. I know this Council didn't decide to send waste to Bingham Park. In fact, that happened well before your time in elected office, indeed before the adoption of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. I also know this waste disposal in Bingham Park stopped before the birth of the environmental justice movement in Warren County, North Carolina in the 1980s, after local residents protested the racially discriminatory effect of another waste disposal proposal. Thankfully, in the years since, the laws, our society, and the composition of this Council have changed. But the waste remains beneath Bingham Park. And you now have a chance to address the harm caused by the actions of your predecessors. By supporting full remediation, you can add to the legacy of Greensboro in the long fight for civil rights. And I hope that you will choose to stand on the right side of history and adopt Option B. Thank you.
Good evening, City Council members, Mayor Vaughn, Pro Tem Johnson, Mayor Pro Tem Johnson. My name is Cheryl Johnson. I'm a member of the Environmental Justice Team for Bingham Park. I'm also a leader representative from Willow Oaks. I'm one voice of that community. Willow Oaks is more than just another housing development. It was built as part of the experimental Hope 6 project. Our community was built there as a pathway for low-income families to thrive after the harm inflicted by the Ku Klux Klan in light of a protest that was peaceful. The community was promised hope that it would be a place for community to be uplifted, provide safe housing, and where the opportunity was to be created for families to break the cycle of poverty and neglect. The city provided incentivized loans to make home ownership in Willow Oaks affordable, making the dream feel real. We believed that this dream would be real for us when my family purchased a home there, that we could build a future for our family in the community. But they didn't tell us that what was beneath Bingham Park was contaminated soil, toxins, and carcinogens. Beneath that park lies carcinogens that could destroy families' health and kill our children. The lead that they could dig up could harm their brains. Other children played in that park and dug it up until the park was closed last April. Now Bingham Park is meant to be a space that's safe, and vibrant for our community if we choose option B, a full remediation of Bingham Park. It stands as a reminder now of broken promises. My 3 grandsons look out their window at a park they can't play in. My eldest grandson, who has autism, he's on the spectrum with ASD. This summer, he went to play with a special team for children, also on the spectrum, with the Greensboro Swarm. He enjoyed that basketball game, and he wants to do more of that. He dreams of a rec center, perhaps over there at the park site over there at the Hampton School. But that can't happen without a full remediation of both sites. I'd like to see that happen too. Our city is thriving in so many ways. We have the Tanger Center, the Grasshopper Stadium, the First Horizon Coliseum, and it's growing. The council has supported those goals. But this progress means that we can all have a greater vision if we decide to do a full remediation. So I hope that you all will support us in that and set a precedent for over 700 pre-regulatory landfills that we have, not just 100. Thank you for your support.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, City Council, thank you for allowing me to speak. Chad Martin, North Carolina Black Alliance. But before I speak, I wanted to address some of the community. At one of the last community meetings, I felt the community was highly disrespected. And I want to apologize personally for how you were treated, because in no way, shape, or form I thought that was right. I do want to say this to this council. Rabbi Heschel said it best: in a free society, few are guilty, but all are responsible. We feel like you have a responsibility. While it is not your fault that this is in place, we feel you have a responsibility to fully remediate this situation. I am not one that likes to come in and talk about problems without talking about solutions. When I served as vice mayor of the city of Martinsville, it always felt like one community always found the money somehow, some way, but then when you talked about other communities, they always said we don't have enough money. One thing I want you to consider, this Biden-Harris administration has some amazing amount of money coming out of this administration to deal with environmental justice issues. Again, I don't like to state issues without saying solutions. We just recently, and thank you to Mr. Lovett and the Office of Sustainability, we recently just took the landfill tour, and we got a chance to see the wastewater treatment plant, and he was totally respectful, and we really appreciate that. But there is amazing amount of money if you partner with community-based organizations through the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, that you might be able to find some money to help fully remediate this situation. And if you go on grow.gov, invest.gov, or build.gov, you will see all these amazing amounts of money that address environmental issues. And we want you to consider that as you're making this decision. Thank you.
After Kathy Koval, Patricia Richmond McFoy, Keisha Cunningham, and Louis Brandon.
Good evening, members of council. I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to speak with you, and I appreciate so much the attention and time that you've given to this over the many years. I'm proud and blessed and honored to be a member of the Bingham Park Environmental Justice Team. And a couple weeks ago, I actually found a flyer from the very first community meeting that was at Eastside Community Park, August 10th of 2017. I was at that meeting, and I'm going to share just a little bit of memories from that early time working with NCDEQ. I had the sense at that time that these were serious scientists, that they took a systematic approach. They had a series of checklists and protocols. They helped us to understand that we had arsenic, lead, ammonia, manganese, SVOCs, semi-volatile organic compounds, and asbestos in that soil. Now, some of those things might be semi-volatile organic compounds. I don't know what all of that means, but I do know that it was at levels that were concerning enough to them that at certain points the park had warning signs, and as we know, since April, it's been closed off for people to use. But I also noted back in that time that I felt that DEQ had some blind spots. They were good people, but they'd never been to a community where they had done a project like this. They had developed a system that worked in rural communities, but they'd never done a project like this in a neighborhood where people were living. And I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but within 2 miles of Bingham Park, we have 36,000 Greensboro residents. Those pictures that you saw, that's not the same picture in those other communities. I also really thought that DEQ was invested in solving the problem, and they came to us saying that there was really just one solution for this, and that they were really focused on the bar of making sure that people weren't exposed to the contaminants anymore. And I understand that as scientists, but I think we want more than that. We want more than a park that's just about not being exposed to toxins. What people in the community want is a place to have Sunday school picnic fellowship time, to meet people up, to be with friends, to go take a walk when you're stressed out and things like that. So I wanted to just fast forward a little bit into the options that are before you today. I also want to commend our city government folks for the work that you've done. But I don't think that option A is viable or permanent. I think it's risky, and I think it's rushed. We have to understand that there's a lot of risk in building 12.7 acres of treeless, shadeless area that also cannot ever be lit, because you can't put a light pole into the ground over in that area. We're also Greensboro is completely responsible if a tornado comes through there again. DEQ's money is gone after this project is over, so that funding source is not viable again. I want to remind us of the statement, the surrounding neighborhoods are not able to have a functional park unless the soil is removed. That's a statement that came from city documents. I ask you to remain, as it was in that headline, indignant over the incinerator site and vote for option B. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Vaughn, Mayor Pro Tem, and City Council members. My name is Patricia Richmond McFoy, and I'm here to express the concerns of the community in a petition that we have. And it reads, the undersigned residents of Greensboro demand that our City Council pursue full remediation of Bingham Park. We ask that you vote accordingly during the special meeting session. Over 100 years ago, the Greensboro City Council voted to place an incinerator and dump in a predominantly African-American area made up of Cottage Grove, Willow Oaks, Eastside Park, and surrounding neighborhoods over the objections of hundreds of city residents. You, our current City Council members, know Greensboro's history and seek to build a stronger, more united, more equitable community. You now have the power to remove the waste containing arsenic, lead, and asbestos, where it can no longer pose a risk to our city's water, soil, and air, nor to the health and well-being of Greensboro residents. In the years since the contamination was discovered, multiple City Council members, city staff, the Parks and Recreation Commission, County Commissioners, Congressman Manning's office, Senator Gladys Robertson, Senator Michael Garrett, and countless neighbors have expressed support for full remediation. We appreciate the vision and hard work of those who have supported the community's call for action over the years. The undersigned members who have signed the petition understand that removing the waste will cost more than leaving it in place. However, capping and covering the waste with a plastic sheet would turn this site into a 12-acre neighborhood eyesore. Since nothing could be planted or constructed atop the plastic cover that may threaten its integrity, the city would be left with 12 acres of shade less expansive with no trees, nor any type of structure that anchors to the ground. In contrast, full remediation allows for 36,000 people who live within 2 miles of the park to once again enjoy meaningful, safe recreational opportunities without fear of additional exposure and contamination. Full remediation also provides more possible avenues to provide amenities the community desires and deserves, including trees, lighting, basketball courts, playgrounds, and picnic shelters. We are grateful for the efforts by our City Council, City Councilwoman Hightower, and all of the other City Council representatives that have supported us. to secure funding for full remediation. We urge our local government to utilize the funds that have already been acquired to begin the process of remediation, full remediation for Bingham Park. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I wrote down some notes that I want to say. My name is Shakisha Cunningham Dockery. I live at 602 Sharing Terrace in Greensboro, North Carolina. I'm here today as someone who was born in this community that we're speaking about. I played at this park. I ate free lunch at the park. I played in the creek, and I crossed the bridge several times a day as a youngster. When I got older, I moved back in this community, or closer to the park on Spencer Street, across from the church, and I walked my children to school every day, to Hampton School, on a contaminated lot that I, too, had to walk on and work with. In the 90s, I lived here until the late 90s, 1999, December, when I moved. None of these things were spoke about then, so I was a part of all this contamination. My children were a part of this contamination, and today I fight with the Bingham Park community to get rid of this contamination as your Parks and Rec Commission chair. In February 2023, the Park and Recreation Commission came together at George Simpkins facility with the EJ Group and many in our community, and we voted against option, which was like A4. It was the full remediation. I might have that wrong. Full remediation of the park. A park is not a park unless you can put trees there, unless you can put benches there, unless children and families can use the park. It's not going to be accessible to me as I age, and we're all aging in this world, if it's not ADA compliant. I won't be able to use this park. I won't be able to walk in. It's already an elevated space, so once we cap and cover, it's going to be even higher, and we won't be able to use it. What else I want to say? Few months ago, we've been fighting back and forth where this should go. We've decided it shouldn't go to White Street, but it shouldn't be capped and covered as well. I believe it is your responsibility as our city council, current city council, to make a decision as soon as possible to remediate this park and find the rest of the funding. This is not something that was done by the community. This is something that was decided by a city council in 1922. And the citizens have had to bear with this all this time, unknowingly and knowingly, because I know older folks who say they knew it was there and they just never went to that park. So we as a county commission, this is my next spot. we as a Parks and Rec commission are supporting a full remediation of this park, nothing less, because it would not be a park with a cap and cover option. Again, we cannot have trees, we cannot have benches, we cannot have things at this site that would make it a park. So we ask for your expeditious and responsible decision as soon as possible in the remediation of Bingham Park. Thank you.
Thank you. After Mr. Brandon, we have Kay Brandon, Leonard Williams, and Desiree Best.
I'm Louis Brandon, and I've lived in Greensboro for 67 years. 64 of those years have been engaged in trying to create social justice in this community. And we have had to do that through demonstrations, lawsuits, boycotts, in order to get the attention of this city. In the 64 or 67 years I've been here, I know of no incident where the city has done something because it was the moral thing to do. We have to struggle. I'm 85 years old. I'm tired of struggling. The right thing to do is to forget about the money and talk about the moral issue here. This is a moral issue.
It is.
And the way to solve this is to adopt the Plan B. We can get money. You get money all the time. So all of the projects that you want to do in Greensboro. But this is a moral issue with me. It's not about money.
Excuse me, Ms. Brandon, can you hold up 1 minute? Desiree Best needs to leave and wanted to know if she'd be able to speak. Is she? She was in the next group of 3 speakers, if you don't mind.
Thank Ms. Brandon. She is Delta. Desiree B. She ran for some. She's a Delta. I think it was school board she ran.
Good evening, Mayor Vaughn, Mayor Pro Tem Johnson, and members of the Greensboro City Council. I am Desiree Best, and I am the president of the Greensboro Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated.
I knew that red. I knew what that red was out there.
Delta was founded on the campus of Howard University in 1913, and since its inception, members have taken an active interest in the welfare of their communities and used their influence toward the enactment of laws to protect those in the community. This is why I'm here tonight. The Bingham Park contamination and White Street landfill issue pitted black neighborhoods against one another. Now, White Street landfill is off the table because the community stood up. The city is at a crossroads with doing what is right. Do we fully remediate Bingham Park? Do we cap Bingham Park and fully remediate the former Hampton site as a park? Clearly, there is a lack of information to make an informed decision. We know the city has identified approximately $18 million for this project. All these funds should be used for the Bingham Park project only. Yes, to cap Bingham Park and fully remediate the former Hampton site and put a park there sounds like a compromise. This is a preliminary estimate of $12.4 million. To fully remediate Bingham Park, of course, is more expensive, $41 to $43 million. The source of the additional $23 to $25 million needed for full remediation is unknown. The city is supposedly committed to finding ways to fund the balance of full remediation once project costs are finalized, following the development of the Remedial Action Plan and final confirmation for NCDEQ funding available for the project. How long will it take for the city to find the additional source of funding? Is the cost going to increase while waiting for project costs to be finalized and the action plan completed? The City Council has known for over 10 years that something needed to be done. It seems that the Council is promising to pay for something but doesn't quite know how it's going to be done. The Council is encouraged to gather more information. How can you, as our elected officials, make an informed decision without all the facts? This would be like asking people to vote without providing them with a ballot. Members of City Council, I thank you so much for your time.
She didn't recommend anything, did she? I agree with that.
Good evening, Council. My name is Kay Brandon. I am here representing Citizens for Economic and Environmental Justice.
Kay, can you get a little closer to the microphone? Thank you.
CEJ. We are the community group that was formed to fight the reopening of the White Street landfill to municipal solid waste. The stated goal of CEJ is to keep the landfill closed to MSW for the future growth of Greensboro. Historically, minority neighborhoods serve as dumping grounds for the rest of the city. Our neighborhoods have been overlooked and underserved, often left with empty promises. We are the victims of environmental and economic discrimination, devalued property, and poor health outcomes. Negative impacts are not distributed around the city. They're always in East Greensboro. This is not a coincidence, but rather conscious and harmful racism. In this city, the plan to move contaminated soil from one minority community to another minority community without input from community members is a glaring example of this practice, whether conscious or unconscious or just elitism. I am glad the city has decided against using the White Street landfill for dumping of toxic waste. I wish this would be an opportunity for the city to begin to look at long-term solutions for disposal of solid waste. Perhaps reinstating the Solid Waste Management Commission could be beneficial in this effort. Now, the members of CEJ ask the city to remedy the situation at contaminated Bingham Park, not by cap and cover of the contaminated soil, but by full remediation of the area. Since the 1970s, this city has failed in its duty to protect the citizens of Bingham Park. The Bingham Park neighborhood is way past due in getting contaminated soil removed. Please do the right thing.
After Mr. Williams, we have our final three speakers, Walter Richmond, Ben Smith, and Byron Gladden. If you think you've signed up to speak and I haven't called your name, please see the courier.
Good evening. My name is Leonard Williams. I live approximately 400 to 800 feet from Phase 3 landfill, Nealtown Road. This may sound redundant. However, with climate change and land contamination being discovered and air emissions, pollutants from dirt, oil, soil dumped, with other hotspots and soil contaminants. I'm not going to waste a whole lot of time here. I'm just going to say this. How many colleges and universities do we have here in Greensboro, North Carolina? And I'm a big advocate and a study of Einstein. And if anybody knows anything about Einstein, physics, biology, how come we can't invest into our university here to study the soil? Because we got too many hot spots here in Greensboro. And if we resolve this by doing a Band-Aid on this, what's going to happen the next time in the next community? Invest into our colleges and universities here in Greensboro, North Carolina, and ask them to study soil. I said that to say this. If a person is sprayed with pepper spray, milk will dilute it. We even beat COVID. I don't know why y'all won't. Ask the universities. Get into the biology. Einstein did it, physics and biology. Y'all have a great evening.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Ben Smith. I'm a resident of the impacted community. I'm a father. I'm also a member of United Auto Workers, Local 5287, which represents 1,900 workers at the big Thomasville buses plant, also in Guilford County. We stuck together in solidarity earlier this year and won a record contract through our solidarity, our unity, our strike readiness, our glorious power of the people. And I really believe in the power of the people. And I want to say I stand in solidarity with the community here in calling for a full remediation of the park and calling on y'all to vote for option B. I want my son and all children, all residents to be able to play in a fully remediated, beautiful park for our community. So call for option B, and I yield the rest of my time to my neighbor, Terry.
Yeah, we don't yield. We don't yield time.
I just want to say one thing. My name is Terry Jones, and I live in Willow Oaks. And I think that we dig a little deeper and see how the option B will benefit the community with putting a rec center for the children to be able to play and do other things and to explore and to be exposed to other things. It will actually change not only the land, but the whole community of that side of town. And also, I just want you to take a moment to think about your neighborhoods and your backyards. Think about what you would like to see. What would you want done in your backyards? Thank you, Dan.
Walter Richmond. Mr. Richmond?
Was he here before?
Good evening, council members. Most of you know me. Most of you, I have been on the campaign field for you, working for you. At 6 years old, I was in Bingham Park, okay? And at 12 years old, I was on Dunbar Street. I've lived through 2 bad incinerators processes. One off of Florida Street, where my professor that taught me at A&T, Jimmy I. Barber, insisted that I go into transportation and study that field. I'm asking the council to take Jimmy I. Barber's lead and ideas and stand up for your people in the east side of Greensboro, all of them. I ate biscuits and took biscuit bologna sandwiches to elementary school because my father said we were going to get a house and move out of Gillespie Street and move out of that area. Of course, you know, the other side of town called it Balky Bottom. So that's why you got a newspaper article back in the 50s saying nobody lived there. Well, we were there. We were there. We weren't counted as residents and people. So, Hugh, yes, I have a different sight of what should be done over there, and I'm saying option B is the way to go, okay? It's better than anything else that you can offer. Use the 2,600 dump trucks and move that waste out of there. Move it. That's what all I'm asking. Move the waste out. Let's do the job. Let's do the work that we need. I'm president and founder of New Hope Community Development Group. And if you want to meet with some people that's eager to find options, to find money, you contact New Hope Community Development Group, my executive director, Pat McFoy, and the Greensboro Housing Coalition community advocate, Tierra Brown. Work with them. Work with them. Mary Kay, I have the garden that you so beautifully bless us with to have. And we're still growing vegetables over there. We're wanting to keep residents there, not have them move in and move out. A good friend of mine that's here tonight told me, why are you trying to build a house over there on that side of town? Nobody's going to buy the house. Well, I'm here to say to him, 2 houses have been built, not another apartment. 2 houses. And we're working on, my good friend is working on building more. But we got to have your help and support. Thank you so much, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you. And our final speaker.
Good evening, council members. My name is Byron Gladden. I'm one of the co-founders for Greensboro Environmental Justice League, and I am here in support of option C. Now, option C is not up there. What is option C? Option C is for this city council to present a strategic plan that serves all of Greensboro as it relates to environmental justice and restitution, and not creating division between neighborhoods. Members of White Street and Nealtown were falsely accused of perpetuating a divide with Bingham Park. We were gaslighted that we were crazy, we were dumb, we were ashamed, should be ashamed of ourselves for not wanting the best for Bingham Park. That was said to us by members of City Council and staff. And there was never an apology. We didn't get the courtesy of a closed meeting about next steps. Half of us got a phone call. And so without a strategic plan about how to move Greensboro environmental justice forward for everyone, you're pitting communities against each other. Option B is $50 million, 41 to 43, give or take $1 million for full remediation. They don't even get equipment for the park they're advocating for. That's not even a part of the estimate. I would be a fool to sit here and advise them to sell themselves so short as to not to get a full dream realized and envisioned, and only to get new dirt and then to have to beg, borrow, and steal for equipment for a $50 million place to look like a park at Nealtown or a park off Phillips Avenue, and put them at the mercy of grants and other benefactors to actually facilitate the appropriate facilities for the park. We owe them more than that. We owe White Street more than that. I've gone through and looked at the strategic plan. Where's my time? Okay, a minute. Creating Great Places describes the creation of interesting, attractive places and vibrant public spaces in neighborhoods across Greensboro. You all have a vision and mission statement that was presented as part of your GSO 40 plan to create a community that provides exceptional quality of life. By voting tonight without a strategic plan, you are making a decision which lives you value. All lives in Greensboro matter, and I want you all to be conscious of the decisions that you make for short-term gains or rounds of applause for your individual districts. These types of decisions, there was a man that stood here at a podium several years ago because of the recipe of these types of decisions. He came in here as a manager working for a local restaurant and left out of here and became viral, and later on a candidate for lieutenant governor in North Carolina, and he won. Because of here, we created that individual. We gave that individual a platform because of the decisions that we made, and we have to think this through. Let your new city manager come up with a strategic plan that will empower you all to make a decision for all of Greensboro. All Greensboro matters.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So those are all of the speakers we had on this item. Now is the time for council discussion and questions. Mrs. Hightower?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My questions are, of course, for staff. I do want to thank all the speakers who've come out and exhibited their passion for their choice of our decision tonight. But I want to make sure people understand we're really being fully informed. How long has Bingham Park, because there were some comments tonight that we just closed it in April, how long has Bingham Park actually been closed?
Yes, so Bingham Park was, we placed a fence at Bingham Park earlier this year, as you mentioned. However, amenities had been removed at Bingham Park, I don't know exactly when, sometime before that. So it's not been a fully functioning park. Now, the fence was put up to secure the area to really further minimize access and coming into contact with the contaminated soil and material on site.
Right, so the soil that's there now, I think is bonded. The materials that's there now is bonded to the soil, but EPA lowered the levels of lead, which is why we fenced it in. Is that what I'm understanding from
That's right. The EPA did change a threshold for that, which prompted us to do another look at the testing results and the numbers. And that prompted our decision from a safety and risk mitigation strategy to place the fence up around the park and to update the park signage further. There was signage there that indicated that park users or visitors should not access the creek or eat the soil, things of that nature, but we took that added step of securing it with a fence as well. Now, I think it's also worth noting that, you know, the threshold change doesn't mean necessarily that it was any more or less safe.
Right.
But we took that added step.
Just, you know, as a precaution.
And you know, I'd be happy to have our representative from S&ME speak to the testing results if that would be helpful.
Yes, it would be.
Okay.
specifically, what do you want us to discuss?
Speaking to the amount of the heavy metals, semi-organic volatile compounds found in the soil and the safety.
As far as they relate to the concentrations, because we've collected hundreds of samples.
If you could share that.
So,
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
so specifically, everything that we sampled for was to the criteria of the EPA guidance for lead for 400 ppm. So I'm really kind of confused on.
Sorry, I didn't mean to throw.
No.
I'm
just really trying to.
I just want to understand.
Samples.
Yeah. So
that you found.
samples were, like I said, samples were collected in the superficial soils and in the waste itself, and those levels were used to determine the different zones that were highly contaminated. Beyond the initial testing, we did testing for what's called T-clip or SPLP, and that determines how mobile the contaminants are within the soil. So if they have the ability to leach out of the soil and get into the groundwater, for instance. So what we did when we were doing the testing, we took the highest levels of contamination that we found at the site and ran those by that separate analysis to determine if it was leachable, and it was not. And it was also not identified as has waste levels. So while the total metals were higher in some cases, as high as 10,000 ppm, I believe we had a couple samples. Yeah, they were not at that level that they were going to leach out into the groundwater. And so that's kind of what we were looking for, because the waste itself is such a mixed unit. It's not like stratified. It's not hot spots here, clean areas there. It's really mixed together. When we sample, you could sample in the exact same spot over and over again and get different levels based on the material. It's a really clayey soil. There's a lot of liquid mixed into the soil, and when they take that soil and they send it to the lab has a procedure in which they dry the sample and analyze it, but it's inconsistent because of the way that they test the soil. So that's why we collected so many additional soils over the site. What I will say is that for the Bingham Park itself, when we tried to come up with a total waste volume, we did additional samples on a 100-foot grid spacing to make sure we got as much data as we could. The initial pre-regulatory landfill guidance sampling calls for certain samples to be collected. So you're trying to get an overall generalized view of the site. These sites are very large. Some of them are 2 acres, some are 30 acres. So you're trying to get a generalized view of the site. By doing that grid sampling approach, we tried to get a more confined level to see if we had 100 samples in that 10,000 threshold, or if most were in the 100 to 400 range. And then we speciated to try and make sure it wasn't has waste levels. I hope that answers your question.
It answers my question.
Okay. But I wanted to speak to the inconsistency of the soil sampling itself, because you
well,
can.
I think I was asking because I think as something. Oh, I'm sorry. I was asking the question because I think some are saying that we got all these high levels of lead, but really what I'm hearing is that they're really not that high. It's just EPA shifted down, lower down their actual requirements, but we were meeting, we were not exceeding what was already in place.
Well, many of the samples did exceed those EPA thresholds.
Yeah, there are high levels of, you can speak to what, but lead, arsenic.
Manganese, many of the different heavy metals. When the waste is burned through an incinerator process, it burns off many of the volatile organics and the semi-volatiles. What's left behind are the condensed metals, heavy metals, and that's why the lead, arsenic, and manganese and several other constituents are left behind in higher concentrations. When I talked about the different medias that were sampled at the site, when we do the pre-regulatory landfill assessments, we look at all the different medias that can groundwater, surface water, soil gas, different ways that the contaminants can leave the landfill and contaminate the public and put the public at risk. And that's why when we sampled the groundwater around, we noticed that the lead concentrations were not elevated in those samples, indicating that the lead was not leaching out of the soil contamination. A lot of these sites, especially this one that's been closed for so many years, all that rain infiltration has washed out a lot of the contaminants, and what's left behind are the consolidated metals.
So if, and I'll speak to option A with cap and cover. So in looking at cap and cover, those metals you're talking about are going to be down in the soil. And so the cap itself won't allow, and it's not just a piece of plastic, as I heard earlier.
No, ma'am.
Just
Yeah, you
thrown
had
over
the-
top of it, but that won't, cap and cover will not allow those things to escape.
I'm hesitant to say not allow those contaminants
Well, maybe
to
I'm
escape,
saying-
but
maybe
by the design and the layout of the structure where you have the vegetated soil cover over that demarcation fabric, the demarcation fabric is to put a placement on top of the soil. It's not a barrier. It's a vegetated soil cover, so it allows the vegetation to grow and it allows the rain to infiltrate into it. So the contaminants could potentially migrate up, but it's unlikely. So that's why I don't want to say it specifically. Maybe Ryan or Bill could speak to that a little better. You never
Okay.
want to guarantee anything. It's Ryan Chan.
Good evening. I'm sorry, what was the question, ma'am? The design of the cover?
Yeah.
It's a geotextile fabric similar to cloth, and it will allow rainwater to infiltrate through the waste. So on top of the waste, that geotextile will be placed, and then 12 inches of soil, and then grass will be established, and then that cover will be on top of the waste material, but it's not a clay designed or impermeable layer. It will allow infiltration.
It's pretty hairy anyway.
Okay. I hear. Okay. All right, that answers my question, I think, for now.
Okay, thank you.
I did have a follow-up question to that one. I'm sorry, is it Madam Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
By all means, don't hit me.
I really like B. I had thought I might vote for A because we could get it done quicker and not have to run the money, but I try to be consistently consistent. And I'm the mayor that started the Sustainability Commission, and I made some statements when we were closing White Street that were very passionate statements, and I'm going to be consistent. I don't know how long it will take us to raise the money, but I think the people deserve to have that. I may win or may lose, don't know, but I'm going to do what I believe is right, and that's what I believe is right. I'm done.
I had a quick follow-up question to Sharon's line of questioning, I guess for the SNME, regarding I think you said that in response that some of the toxins could migrate up. Did I hear that?
I said I didn't want to say that they couldn't. Because,
So they can't?
Because it's not really, the vegetated soil cover is not designed for anything other than dermal protection from the surface. So again, if I'm speaking out of turn, please correct me if I'm wrong.
Can the toxins migrate up from the barrier?
I would say no, sir. The barrier's there with the fabric is put on top of the waste and the 12 inches of soil, and the grass is planted on top of that soil. And if that is maintained, then the goal of that cover is to not have erosion and allow the waste to be exposed.
That's a 100% guarantee?
Well, nothing's guaranteed, sir. I mean, there's maintenance
If-
required.
If
So
we
there-
could stop the conversation in the audience, we're having difficulty hearing the speaker.
Yeah, there's maintenance requirements with the risk-based remedy, and that requires maintaining the 12 inches of soil and the vegetative cover to prevent erosion. And then there's annual certification to DEQ, letting the state know that the cover is in place as it was during construction, and everything's been maintained.
Okay, thank you. Just another follow-up question. Regarding the testing that you've done, you said that I might be, well, there may be some higher levels than are normal in some places. Is that correct? In some of the toxins, the heavy metals, the manganese, the lead, the arsenic.
What I was saying is that it's inconsistent. So, you picture this waste was put in over a number of years, and typically that contamination would migrate down into the soil column. So when we're sampling from the surface, we use a drill rig with augers that pull the soil from the ground, bring it up to the surface. So in that process, you're not only bringing in the highest contaminants from the bottom, but you're also bringing up some of the lighter contaminants from the top. So that material gets mixed together, and what actually gets sent to the lab, it varies.
Right. So in those testing opportunities you have, you talked about the concentration. Have you noticed any movement? Because I guess the concentrations are looking at north-south.
I see what you're saying.
How about east-west? Are you noticing in your test over a period of time the trend line? Is that trend line staying that the toxins are contained, or do you see some movement outward?
I understand what you're saying, and if we would have done multiple sampling events over a period of time, we could probably tell that. But unlike groundwater, where groundwater plumes tend to move and migrate out, soil contaminants tend to stay local unless they're pushed out by the water. And we use the groundwater sampling data as an indicator to see if those metals are being pushed out into the groundwater or pushed out laterally.
And remind me again of what your groundwater testing has shown.
Yeah, we had no lead detected in the groundwater samples that were collected from the site, but we did have other metals.
Were they collected from all throughout the site, just the center, on the edges, variety of places?
Typically, the pre-reg landfill guidance calls for the perimeter sampling, and then I think we might have had one or two located in the waste. I don't remember exactly, but yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Sharon?
Yeah, so I don't know if my question's for them, might be for you. So if we look at Plan B, everybody's talking about that, but if we do cap and cover field, is there potential to do things like planter boxes where we would do a nature trail through there? Because the greenway's coming, so we'd still be able to connect to the greenway. I say the greenway's coming, even though it's not funded either. So there's money that's going to have to be found for that as well.
Yes, you're referring to the East Greensboro Greenway. We're working with the state to do a feasibility study to, determine the route, and the route is envisioned to go by and through Bingham Park and Hampton School, in that very vicinity. So really, regardless of which option is chosen, when you see trails, now granted some can be paved, some would have to be unpaved if the cap and contain option was selected, those pathways would provide access down to the Greenway, for example, if it came down English Street from A&T and out to Barber Park. And that said, we would seek connectivity with both options. What we would be limited in at Bingham is it would be natural surface or unpaved trails, and it could be potentially perennial types of flowers that don't grow through that vegetative cover that you see there on the screen, so that it would not be growing through that 12 inches of cover material. So we would seek to beautify the property through doing that. And also you mentioned planter boxes. So things could go up on top of the surface material as well. That is a large 12-acre parcel, so there's a lot of ground to cover there, but that would be something else acceptable. The key is not to allow anything planted or placed at the property to penetrate through that soil cover.
So let me ask you a question on generally neighborhood parks that we see and we do in all our neighborhoods. How generally large are they? Can you answer that? So like we could, at Plan A would give us that, would it not, at Hampton School?
It would. At Hampton School right now, we don't have, constraints per se, other than the contaminated area is certainly a constraint. I mean, that would be, thank you, that would really be, an option that council could decide is how much of Hampton School, where a park could be accommodated there. I mean, our neighborhood parks range in size from being very small, 1 acre parcels to, 5 acres or more. So they really do range in size. It's more about who it's designed to serve and the amenities that are placed there. So neighborhood parks typically wouldn't have lights, typically wouldn't have extensive parking or even restrooms. By design, community parks would tend to have more amenities like parking and restroom and lights that it can serve people beyond kind of the immediate area. Greensboro is really proud to be ranked with the Trust for Public Land in regard to access to parks. And really the criteria is being within a 10-minute walk from a park facility. So that's really what we would be seeking here, is looking within kind of a 10-minute walking radius to be able to be served by a park that's redeveloped here.
So how many acres is Hampton? Do we remember? So we did a park, we could still do mixed-use development on that site.
Absolutely.
So we would still have that ability to do that.
16 acres.
So 16 acres. So actually, what we could, a park with Plan A gives us the park, opportunity for mixed use type of development as well.
It could. I mean, with that amount of acreage, there could conceivably be room for multiple types of uses. I mean, that's really going to be like a sort of a policy level decision about, okay, now that property is a part of the city's inventory, what is the kind of the highest and best use for that? And what we're proposing here, particularly if option A is selected, that a portion of that property be designated so that we could construct a neighborhood park consistent with public engagement, community desires, interests, and providing that access point.
So, and the one other thing, everybody wants full remediation, and I have to confess in full transparency, when this conversation initially started a few years ago, we didn't have a lot of options. And so, I too said, well, we get a full remediation. We don't want a Band-Aid, but I don't feel this is a Band-Aid. I feel this gives us really more option than we've ever had before, more money than we've had before. What concerns me is if we lose out on the money we have now, then we're going to start this fight over again to try to get more money. I hear all about, these different entities have all this money, but I've talked to EPA. As you know, you went to Washington. I said on the call, we talked to EPA. We've been to Washington, D.C. The money's not out there like that. The money comes out in small pockets of grants, anywhere from $250,000 to $500,000. So it sounds good to say, they have money. Let's get it and let's fix, what we want to do. But it's not out there. And so this conversation's been going on for 10 plus years now, I know. And we did get outside interest. NCDEQ has never really participated to this high level before. But we are also competing with other cities who have pre-regulatory landfills and want to do some things. So we could lose even NCDEQ's money, and we can get behind the line. Right now, we may be in the front of the line. We may get behind the line. So we could lose all our funding and not have any opportunity to do anything at all. Would you agree?
Yes, so the DEQ, they've mentioned working on projects in Clayton, coming up in Durham as well, and other communities that we know as parks professionals through our contacts, folks questioning, well, how is Greensboro dealing with, our situation here? And so we know, and the DEQ has told us that There is a designated amount of money in their pre-regulatory landfill funding, and at this point, they're pledging $7 million. And certainly that's with the understanding that we would be to a point of a decision at some point soon, because that money could fluctuate down or up, just depending on other projects that are in line and making requests of the money. Is that accurate to say, Bill? So that is why we have that $7 million figure from the DEQ's pre-regulatory landfill program noted in that particular projection.
Okay. This may be an off-the-cuff question, but have we ever seen money like this before? Have we ever gotten money like this from the federal and the state for just a project like this?
Certainly not for this particular project or this type of project that I'm aware of. I mean, this is a really significant amount of funding that has been, allocated or committed for this. And so, I think it's to the city now to really make a decision on this so that we can know how will that money be able to be utilized.
Well, also, Plan A, if we were to use Plan A and move forward with that and get a remedial action plan started with Plan A, and we know the plans of the park and maybe get us a mixed-use development would be great, as well as what could occur at Bingham with walking trails. Does that take full remediation off the table?
So our understanding is that no. I mean, what it does do, though, is from the state's pre-regulatory funding, they would fund their portion of the project, that $7 million, and then it would be the city's responsibility to maintain that site. If that option is selected, it would be on the city to maintain this cap and contain system there in perpetuity. That fund, we would not be eligible to tap in to that funding again to do other remediation strategies there. Now, we also understand that the containment and cover system, or the cap and cover system, if there were to be money for full remediation one day, that then that system could be removed. I mean, it was described to you tonight. It could be removed and then the full remediation could occur, but that would certainly be contingent upon having the full funding to be able to do full remediation in the future, as well as knowing that, as we've seen in these cost estimates, they're only continuing to go up. So our gap in what we have and what we need would only continue to grow.
But if money fell from heaven, money came from heaven, we could go back for full remediation.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of that is kind of, this is the opportunity that can be before us at this point in time, but it doesn't preclude or prevent us from looking at other options in the future.
Right. So it doesn't stop us from even talking about seeking other funding or looking for other monies for that, but being practical about what we're thinking about doing is to give the community somewhat of what they've asked for when they talk about not having any park, even though they're a few miles from Barber Park, that's true, but they would want something close by to them, and Willow Oaks is growing. They are building, and they know where they're building. The builders, all of the builders over there know what they're building, and they know where they're building. So they are very aware of being over in that area and know there's no contamination in the places they're currently building at. But the community is growing. So this does allow them to have some amenity that they've been asking for, while we still continue to look for if cap and cover at least takes that fence down. What bothers me is that we have a space that's fenced, that we totally don't go into. We don't have any access to, and at least this would allow some of that to be removed. would it not?
Yes, I mean, either of these strategies would allow the fence to be removed. As Mr. Lovett mentioned, this is a complex and involved project with either option that could be selected. And he mentioned the time frame, I believe, of 14 months duration of the project. Use your, yeah.
The cap and cover estimate provided by the state was about 12 and a half months, but the full remediation was 14 plus months, regardless of which landfill it went to. They made some assumptions in that cost, in that schedule, but that's the assessment that they provided to us.
So it is a really involved project either way. And so, you know, as far as a decision being made, I think that it's important to think through kind of what we know now and what we might anticipate in the future. So, you know, and making a decision based off of information now, but also thinking through, you know, is this thought of as kind of the final strategy and approach? Because as I've mentioned, the State Department of Environmental Quality has said that, you know, after this moves forward, whichever option is selected, that really it's something that they've worked on, provided funding to, and they would not be continuing to engage with us. So it would be the city's responsibility if one day the city wanted to make a different decision and had funding available to pursue full remediation. So I want to make sure that that's clear, is that really it becomes the city's obligation if we go with either option. It's up to us. And so really our ability to tap into DEQ funding for kind of, well, let's do cap and cover as a semi-permanent option and then later pursue full remediation, you know, that's not what their funding source is designed to do. It's designed to do something, you know, with what's available, and then it becomes the city's obligation from there. Is that accurate to say, Bill?
Yeah, please, if
Yeah.
you're going to speak, come up to the podium.
Yeah, he's saying that the city would be obligated to maintain the properties moving forward.
Okay, so even after cap and cover, we still have that
Yes.
responsibility to maintain.
That's right.
And make sure that everything is still follows state guidelines, like we do now with our landfills currently that's in operation.
Richard, do you want to speak to that in terms of our monitoring or our maintenance of this particular location if the containment and cover is selected?
So it would be handled very similar to brownfields properties that the city has, and they have to submit an LURU every year, which is basically certifying that the engineering controls or the conditions on the site have remained the same over that period of time. And if not, you have to identify what changed and how you're addressing that to bring it back into its original condition when the agreement was, I guess, authorized.
Oh, yeah. No, you answered my question, and thank you very much, Richard. So it's not like they cap and contain it and then walk away and nobody does anything else. Just like, so we continually monitor it, it's regulated. So our responsibility to ensure everything stays safe will remain in forever. Until
Yes.
till money comes from heaven, and then we could say, well, we can remediate it now.
Yeah, I mean, and coming back to the state DEQ funding, the $7 million has been pledged to be there for one of these options. But once the remediation occurs, whichever strategy is selected, if one of them is selected, then basically the state's pre-regulatory landfill program and their funding is not something that can be considered or eligible for in the future. So I just want to emphasize that because this is a very involved project either way that it should go in terms of the scope of work and the amount of work and the cost associated with it. And so, you know, we really don't know what that could look like if at some point in the future the containment and cover was selected, but then in the future full remediation was to occur, that would be a very involved project as well, to remove the system and then do the full-scale remediation as well. We've heard about the number of dump truck loads that this would require. We've heard about what today's costs would be, but we've seen just in 2 years how those costs have skyrocketed.
What do you consider to be some of the most costly costs? Which costs are costing us the most?
Richard?
So based on the cost estimate that was prepared, the three of the big main driving costs in the remediation are the transportation, the disposal, and then sampling to confirm that the remediation was completed. So I believe that is probably 60-ish% of the overall costs. So that's a big driver when you're doing the calculation. So depending upon the disposal location, the cost to dispose of it at that location, that's really the bulk of the assessment or cost estimate.
Okay. But that's gas, that's trucks, and so we would contract out that service pretty much.
My understanding, so when the part of the resolutions that are presented to you include, directives from council for us to secure or pursue a master service agreement with an engineering contractor that can help develop the remedial action work plan. That will be also part of the bid documents that are prepared. So we would be overseeing the hiring of roughly 25,000 dump trucks to move material in and out of Bingham Park. Because not only do you remove the stuff, but you got to put soil back into the park. So you're basically, whatever numbers that were put up there, I think there was 13,000 plus another 1,200 for Hampton in regard to dump trucks. That's to remove all the soil. We still have to put soil back in place and bring it back up to grade. So it's a much larger number of dump trucks that has a dramatic impact on the community too. And we would have oversight in the bid process to select contractors that can perform those types of activities.
I'll wait.
Okay.
Somebody else has.
So I have Mr. Holston, followed by Mrs. Thurm, Dr. Wells, and Mrs. Abuzawader.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to limit them so we can get more of our council members to get in. Regarding the numbers, the $18.05 million, you talked earlier about those federal funds of $1.5 million have an expiration or come up for air on 2032. The House Bill 259 of $10 million in 2026, and for the DEQ, I didn't hear a date for those. Are those just perpetually available to us?
So that depends. There's not a date assigned to that figure. That depends on other projects and requests that they have coming in for project management from other pre-regulatory sites.
So others could peel from that one.
Right, that's correct.
So the next question is, on those funds for House Bill 259 and also for the federal funds, do those funds have to be expended, or can it simply that they're encumbered? And what about the extension? What's the extension process on those?
So we're seeking some clarity related to an extension process for that. Specifically, we have asked with the state funds if knowing what we're going to do definitively would be sufficient in order to carry those funds forward beyond the mid-2026 reversion date. So we're seeking some clarity on that because while there was a bill that made this happen, it then falls into a different department, if you will, of the state that manages the funds. And so they have parameters for how these particular funds get managed. And so that is where we're seeking some clarity on that in terms of wanting to know exactly that, is an encumbrance for a very clear, defined purpose sufficient, or does the money truly have to be spent?
Mm-hmm. And thank you. And this may be for you also, for our city manager staff. Is it traditional that we have to have all the funds up front, or based upon the queuing or the expense flow of the project, can we say if the project is, say, $41 million, do we need to have $41 million today, or can we use the $18 million today, and then if we have to commit city funds or a bond or property taxes or a prepared food tax towards the funds?
Yeah, that won't qualify.
I'm going to yield to ACM, both Davis and McCray. I know they have had some discussion in this area.
Whatever we're going to put out for contract, the funds would need to be on our premises at that time. So however the project can be staged, whatever amount goes to contract, we have to have those funds at that time.
So you're saying that we must have it up front for the entire contract?
For whatever goes under contract, yes.
So then we can stage the contract then?
I can't speak to that. That's for the managers of the project. But anything that we want to put under contract, the funds have to be here for the encumbrance to actually occur.
Okay. For the 43 million, and also I guess for the 12.4 million, is there an allotment for contingency? That is, something happened, price increases.
There's a 10% contingency included in those costs. So I think it's 15% contingency included in that $43 million cost.
Okay.
I think it's also important to note that until the scope of the project is fully defined and it's bid out, these at this point are cost estimates, and they are thorough cost estimates. However, until the project is actually bid out, we won't fully know what that cost could be, or accurately know what that cost will be, I guess I should say.
Okay. And just one more question. Previously, in a previous time, Barber Park had an issue. How do we resolve that? Was that a cap and cover?
So Barber Park did have an issue, and there were multiple strategies that were used to address that. And also the contamination that was present there was a different type of waste material. So I don't know if Deputy City Manager Wilson might want to address that. That may have been under his tenure in Parks and Recreation.
Was it cap and cover? That's what the question is.
So to Phil's point, and I'll ask Nasha to help me here, we did have, so we encapsulated, I wouldn't call it cap and cover necessarily, so there were areas where we did dirt removal, and there were areas where we encapsulated. There were areas that we did not have to touch because they were not developable, and so we left those intact. And Nasha, there was a vapor barrier, if I'm not mistaken, and a monitoring system that we put in place. So we did use a vapor barrier for one of those areas.
That's correct, Chris. And in addition to that, there are active monitoring wells that are on site, which, again, because of the concentration and the waste that's characterized at Barber Park being slightly different than what is at Bingham Park, that was an additional safety measure that was put in place for that particular facility.
Thank you.
The only thing I would add is, in hearing the discussion, the ongoing maintenance piece that was discussed earlier is not unlike the sites like a Barber Park, where we have a responsibility to continuously monitor and report and maintain. We do that with brownfield sites as well. There are multiple locations where we do that.
Okay. And then just one last question. In a cap and cover, do we have to move dirt to cap and cover? Or do we just...
So remediation would occur along the stream bank. There's a banked area along the stream that material, the banked agreement has to be revoked through the Army Corps and stuff like that. Then we have to remediate and restabilize the slopes around the stream itself. That material would be brought up onto Bingham Park itself and positioned under the cap and cover while that stream area is fully restored. We have to return that back to the wooded area that it currently is under that banked agreement that we are already under. So that area immediately around the creek will be fully remediated, but that remedial material will be placed on top of Bingham Park, and then the cap will be placed on top of that.
Okay, so the remediated soil from the stream goes to the surface of the park, then is it a 12-inch barrier? Goes on top of all that?
The fabric, as indicated in the diagram in the presentation, would be applied over top of that, and then you'd have your cover material and your vegetated material. But around the stream itself, that would be fully remediated. There would be no impacted soil. There would be clean soil and trees, vegetation, and soil stabilization media around the stream itself.
And with the surface of Bingham Park being a walking trail, so to speak, you would not encourage, or you would discourage, or you would disallow, say, if I took my grandson over there to play football and play tackle or something?
So once an option is chosen, either A or B, if it's A, then the park becomes a passive park for passive recreation. So it's available for all passive recreation uses, right? So you can do pretty much whatever's allowable without penetrating the soil. And so we wouldn't have a spiked or cleat sport over there. We wouldn't put a ball field over there because that over time digs up the soil. If you want to throw the frisbee, if you want to toss the football and you're just playing around, then that's a passive recreation activity. Anything beyond that would be discouraged or unallowed because it could potentially penetrate the soil.
Thank you.
Mrs. Thurm?
Yes, thank you. Several of the speakers talked about lighting, and I'm sensitive to the fact that you're looking at past 12 acres. I think you said, what kind of lighting could we do in that area? I am concerned about having just a dark 12-acre site if we went with option A, that people could be up to all sorts of nefarious behaviors in that area. And it seems like it would be a magnet for that. So what could we do in terms of lighting? Are there options?
So that's a really good question. So the key on structures like lighting that would be desired for Bingham Park would be if cap and contain is selected, is not penetrating that containment, that cap geotextile material. So, we would have to look at what sort of technology would be available from a support structure standpoint that could work on that property, as well as considering the utilities that would need to get to that lighting. Of course, they make different options for solar-powered lighting now as well that are fairly high-tech lighting that can operate for extended periods of time, but we would need to really fully explore that, because one of the key aspects or drawbacks, rather, of the cap and contain is not being able to construct surfaces or construct structures, rather, that penetrate that cap material in that surface. I will say, though, as a matter of practice, we don't typically install extensive lighting in neighborhood parks because neighborhood parks are open from dawn to dusk. And lighting, while it does provide for a sense of security and visibility, it can also have the unintended effect of drawing people into a property when it is technically closed. So we consider requests for lighting in neighborhood parks on a case-by-case basis, as well as kind of looking at the amenities there that are in those parks to determine whether lighting would be necessary, whether it is an interest from a security standpoint, et cetera. So that would be something warranting further exploration.
Councilperson Thurm, if I could just add to that from a public safety standpoint, with neighborhood parks where we find that lighting can assist in public safety or lighting for people who may be walking in a park area, we look at the adjacent street lighting and amps and angling of those lights so that we can produce some light in the areas that are needed.
Got it. Thank you. I just want to make one comment. I'm very torn on this, but I'm also very cognizant, and I think we have to be cognizant about the fact that as we look for grants, as we look for money, if we were to go with option B, that we have no idea what the state or federal government will look like 5 months from now. And what options will be available. And I think we need to think about that and look at the likelihood that some of these funds, A, might disappear, and B, there be less likelihood. Conversely, it could be we have more access to funds. I don't know, but I think that we have to at least think about that as we're making our decisions here.
Dr. Wells?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This has been a long journey. Just a long journey. We've had lots of meetings. We've had lots of thoughts. We've had lots of misunderstandings. We've had a lot of misinformation. But we've been gathering a lot of information. And I hear the concerns of the citizens, and I can identify with it because we had to fight when it came to the landfill. And I agree with you, Louis, maybe it is a moral thing. However, that's something that was done 100 years ago, and we are here trying to make decisions about what's best for now. I was talking to someone today, I was talking to Sharon today, and I said, Sharon, what we do when we sit there on that dais affects people's lives, the citizens of Greensboro. We've been elected, I was elected, and a lot of you in this audience voted for me to be the city council representative for District 2. And my concern for the citizens is the same. I want the best for our district. I want the best for our citizens. It was never my intention to cause a rift between 1 and 2. And I think Byron said that there was never an apology for when I spoke at one of the meetings, and I just thought that the behavior was not the best. And I think someone wrote about it also. But I apologize if that was offensive to you. But I guess when you've been working with people for a long time and you feel like, you know, they are the group that you've been fighting for, that you think, I guess you might take too much for a liberty. So I apologize for that. But my initial choice, and I think this whole discussion started when I had my town hall, and I said that something has to be done at Bingham Park, and it looks like the option, the most expedient thing to do is just to carry the waste from Bingham Street over to the White Street landfill, because it's only 4 or 5 or 6 miles rather than taking it way down the road. Oh, well, that started the whole thing. It started it all. And there was a thought, a lot of people, including Mayor Pro Tem, who said that we promised we would keep the White Street landfill closed. We never closed the landfill. We fought to keep from having household waste in the landfill. So the landfill has always been open. And if we're looking for the future, we're going to have to find a bigger place, because we're going to this one is going to be full after a while. But we never really closed the landfill.
We closed it to certain.
To solid. So
Municipal
this wasn't
solid
going
waste.
to open it up to that. But that started another FIRA. So I made my initial choice without the value of a wealth of information. Since that time, we've had all of this information to come from the department. We've had tours of the landfill. We've listened to things and read things, and I know a lot more about this whole business of the soil. All right, but the thing is, here we are now, and we're saying we have some money to get something done. It's been there 100 years. We discovered it 10 or 12 years ago and started that fight, and we haven't moved the needle at all. Now we have some money that we think we can make the change, but we are now saying that maybe we need to just wait. I heard the comment that East Greensboro gets left behind. The citizens of Greensboro voted for a bond. We're getting ready to get a state-of-the-art facility, the Windsor Chavis NOCO Center that's going to be on Gate City Boulevard. Will be different from anything in the country. And the citizens have paid for that. You know, they voted for a bond for that. So I think there are things happening in East Greensboro, but we still have this problem. And it comes down to me is that we have to ask the question, do we want to change Bingham Park, or do we just want to leave it and see how long it's going to take us to get it fully remediated? We can get the change and get the contamination out of Bingham Park and could move on. But if you're going to wait for full remediation, you're going to have the contamination. So to me, it's the question, you want to keep the contamination, or do you want to get rid of the contamination? Because we don't have the money. Don't know when we're going to get the money. And all of us know the old thing that bird in the hand is worth two in the bushes. We got some money now to do it. When are we going to get the other money? It is right. It should be fully remediated. But to me, that's the question. Do you want the change, or do you want it to stay the same until we, and won't be us, because we'll be gone. Some of us will be off the council, and so I don't know when we'll get the money, but that's all I have to say.
Mary Kay?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I do have one question. And I know I heard it at one of the meetings we all attended, and I just want to make sure and see if this has changed or not. But if we choose full remediation, couldn't the landfill site that we choose at 2 months down the road, 3 months down the road, say, we're not going to accept this anymore?
At one time, yes, we believe that to be the case. There's been a subsequent conversation with the Great Oak landfill in regard to tipping rates and just that question that Richard can speak to.
Sure.
So the Great Oak Landfill Waste Management reached out to the City of Greensboro Solid Waste and also Office of Sustainability, and they said that they would be, they could accept the waste, all the waste, for whichever remedial option is selected, and they would be able to use the city's established tipping fees that we currently utilize for our solid waste, which is a very competitive number, and it is less than what the NCDEQ's cost estimate was by a couple dollars per ton. That was not included in the cost because the costs were prepared by DEQ, and we were trying to be consistent with the presentation material. They don't have the access at If they were to do the remediation, they don't have access to the same fees and competitive agreements that we as the city have. So that does give us some additional flexibility. And my rough numbers, and pardon me, but this is kind of off the top of my head, would be approximately a $2 million additional savings if it were to go to Great Oak.
To Great Oak, great. Thank you. But what I'm hearing right now today is that we have the 18 million, and part of that, the state funds could go away in 2026. We don't know anything about extensions. And the federal money would go away in 2032. And of course, if there is a different government then, we're not sure what's going to happen with that. So I'm thinking, and I agree with Mrs. Thurm, that, we need to make sure, if we choose option A, that there is some lighting, or lighting can be focused in the area, or something. The solar lights, as you mentioned, Phil, the technology is amazing now, where they can do full floodlights with solar. Did I hear somebody say something? No. Okay. So I'm curious, though, if we sit here and don't do anything, say we decide not to take a vote tonight or not to take a vote, then where do we stand on all this? We're just sitting here waiting and hoping that we can maybe raise $43 million for Plan B. How can we go about that when we have no idea? I'm just asking, what would we do if we say we want Plan B? We absolutely would not have any money for that. We would only have the 18 million and the 1 million, correct?
Correct, which the 18 million includes that 1 million.
Includes the 1 million.
Yes.
So we need to get the 25 million shortfall. I just don't see how we can raise that much money. I want full remediation as well, but I don't know where we're just going to find overnight $25 million, knowing that this state funding will definitely run out in 2026 as far as we know, as far as we can see into the future. Excuse me. So that's where I'm leaning right now. Still want to hear what other council members say, but if we don't do something now, we may never do anything. And I know this has gone on a really long time. I know we were having discussions as far back as 2009. Yeah. And, nothing's been done yet. And if we don't do something, and then, we've got an issue here where nothing's ever going to happen. It's just going to be on the back burner again. Thank you.
Thank you, Zach, and then I've got brief comments.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't know who this should go to, Phil or Chris or Trey or whoever. Has it been answered, why have we not been able to obtain the rest of the funds to remediate?
So a key issue here is that the city owned the property when the contamination occurred. So that makes it such that we are not eligible for certain funding sources where typically, like through some EPA sources, for example, because we basically caused the contamination or allowed for it while we own the property, we're the responsible party. And so that is a complicating factor here in our conversations that we had with the EPA. I know in 2022 and 2023, they have pledged support to work with us to try to help find additional funds, but things tend to come back to this aspect of responsibility and ownership during the time when the contamination occurred. Also, as we mentioned earlier in the presentation, the city has never kind of talked in concept about what its financial commitment in the project could be. So we talk about state funds and DEQ funds and federal funds, but we ourselves haven't determined what, if anything, our financial commitment would be in this project. And so, that's something else that I think could help support our quest for additional private dollars, let's say. When you talk about things like park development, we've had a lot of success in Greensboro utilizing funds like the Outdoor Recreation Legacy Program, which is a part of the Land and Water Conservation Fund for renovations at Peeler, coming up at NOCO Park. Those are things that are addressing kind of park renovation or park construction, not remediation per se. So for the park aspects, we would certainly be seeking, regardless of which option is selected, what types of other grants and sources could this be really a great candidate for. And we believe that there's some great potential for external funding for the park redevelopment aspect of this.
And remind me, how much do we have allocated for Windsor Chavis NOCO Park?
Let's see. 60, yes, this is a $65 million project. Now,
no.
Then there's the county contributions and Cone Health contributions. Assistant City Manager McCray, I don't know if you want to respond to that.
That's correct, Phil. So there's a combination of both local, federal, county, and private dollars that was included in that project. So the $50 million bond referendum for the construction, if you do reverse back, there was additional bond funds from 2016 and ARP funds that went towards the design, but also the commitment from the county, Cone Health Foundation, and then a federal outdoor recreation legacy grant for that project.
How much does the city have committed to Windsor Chavis NOCO?
So that is a total of, doing mental math, about 73.
$73 million.
That's correct.
Okay.
Why? What's the total cost of the project?
We have not completed the bids yet, so we will get that to you all. That actually will be before you all in the next month or so. So once we get the bids, we can answer that question of what the true cost of the project is, but what we have budgeted is what was shared.
And the county's contribution was $15 million.
That's correct.
So if you add 73 plus 15 without counting Cone Health's 5, I really was just curious about the city's participation. I don't recall, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, did we allocate any American Rescue Plan funds for Bingham Park?
No, we did not.
And why would that be? We were so focused on carpet, we didn't think about Bingham Park.
At the time, we were pursuing these funds, and as I recall, we presented buckets of available funds for various projects, and we were pursuing these funds. And quite honestly, it's taken us since 2010 to get to this point with the funding that's on hand.
Okay. I will say, having just been back, I guess, 2 years, it's been rare that I've seen some council people fight as hard to raise funds as I've seen for Bingham Park. We had a meeting a year ago with the executives of even Lincoln Financial that flew down from Radford. And Councilwoman Hightower did a really great job talking about Bingham and trying to educate people on the concern for the park and the area. As Councilwoman Wells said, we have an option today. We can roll the dice and try to raise an additional $30 million. I will tell you that Councilwoman Hightower called a meeting with myself and the mayor and said, Zach, we need some help. We got $11 million. 4.5 was supposed to come, 4.5 or 5 were supposed to come to downtown. And she said, we need it. And so I said, okay, because I see the significance of Bingham Park. I see it when you've got things coming up. And so in compromise and appreciation out of respect for what Councilwoman Hightower and Councilwoman Wells have tried to do, in addition with everybody else from the previous council, because I just inherited this, and the staff and Phil going to the EPA, if we don't do something, and somebody said, this is a moral issue. This is about healthy and safety, lives that matter. I care about those lives. And I don't say quit. I think I told the Friendly Avenue people, Don't stop. Keep fighting. Keep fighting for funds to remediate. But at this point, if those lives matter, we got to take care of what we got with what we got today. I hate what happened 100 years ago. We're sitting here talking about it. You know, there's a lot of tragic things, but I think the tragic thing would be to walk away from here and not do anything to cap and cover that area and create something. And to have, and I will tell you, and I'll keep going on this just for a second, when when Councilwoman Hightower went and got Hampton School from the school board, I was sitting there thinking, oh, God, it's going to cost us another $40 million. What are we going to do with it? We got an asbestos-ridden school that's dilapidated. Y'all going to get a park? Sharon, you did it. You did it. I mean, honestly, folks, she squeezed everybody she could, including me. She went and got to school, and this right now is going to create a park that people, children, and adults can play in. And if we don't take advantage of what we got today, we can lose it. You can lose it. Now, I will say this. That doesn't mean we can't keep going and asking for money. You don't stop. You don't give up. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen with the government in 5 months. I don't really care that much because I'm going to be knocking on the door asking for money anyway, whether it's Bingham Park or other things. And so I would hate for us, if lives matter, to walk away from here not doing something to put something in motion to protect the lives that matter. And that's my thought. I would support A, so we can move forward and get some things done. And I respect what my fellow council people who represent these districts have done, and the council members at large, and the neighborhood for showing up tonight and caring. This is a difficult decision, but if after 4 years we raise $18 million, I don't see 30 falling out of the sky anytime soon. I would vote for A.
Going back to the ARP funds, if I recall correctly, the Bingham EJ team was going to submit an application, but we didn't know what the budget would be, and we're having difficulty getting information from NCDEQ. So that's one of the reasons why it wasn't considered for ARP funding. You know, this is a difficult decision in some ways, but in other ways it's not. You know, I do think as a council, going back to the council that Yvonne and I sat on that actually closed the landfill to municipal solid waste, that went back to, I think it was the year 2000. And, you know, last year it cost us $13.5 million to take municipal solid waste out of Greensboro to a landfill, because that was a commitment that we made to the neighborhood, a commitment that we made to the city. That is significant financial funding every year that we spend to transport the municipal solid waste. I know that there was a lot of hard work done to get money from the state and federal government. The fact that we got money from the state is really pretty Herculean, because we had never received funding like that before. And to think that we could be in jeopardy of losing that funding, we can't go back and ask for funding for something else. We've got a $31 million delta between the two projects. I think at some point we have to look at it from a practical standpoint to make that property safe. If we wait to try to raise an additional $31 million, we can lose the funding that we already have, and we could continue to see a property with a fence around it. And to me, that just doesn't make sense. And the other thing, we've talked about turnover in the federal government and the state government, but maybe the biggest turnover you need to worry about is the city council turnover. We already know that there are 4 of us who are not running again. Do you remember what happened last time there was a big turnover on council? What was the first thing they went for? They went for opening the landfill. I think we made a very strong case that that would never happen again, but you may not have a council that wants to raise an additional $31 million for a project. And so I think that we have to use the money that we have right now. There was a question about whether or not this could be done in staging. I don't know that you could do a project like this in staging if we were to try to remediate it. I mean, it is just one big project at this point. So we're kind of stuck in a difficult situation that we have money that will give us a solution. It might not be the best solution or the solution that everybody here wants, but it's the solution that we have right now. And the fact that we have to raise an additional $31 million and prices continue to rise truly just doesn't feel feasible at this point. I think that, you know, the neighborhood has done a great job getting their message out, which is why we're here where we are today, that we got the money from the federal government, the state government, and true, we you know, this was a council effort where, you know, we went to the state and asked for $30 million for Bingham Park remediation and $20 million for downtown remediation, because there are hot spots in downtown as well. And, you know, the fact that the majority of the money that we got is going to this Bingham Park, I think really shows how important this project is. So while it's difficult and people may not understand why I'm going to vote the way I am, but I want to see this project get done. And I don't want to leave it up to chance. I don't want to leave it up to who knows who's going to be sitting here a year from now. So those are my feelings. Mr. Holston, I think, had comments, and then Sharon?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You know, there's a phrase in sports that some folks use, is that, you know, the ball don't lie. And you look at these numbers, you know, we have the 18.05 in the bank, so to speak. We have the big ask of up to 41 to 43 million. And so that delta is somewhere between 23 and 25 million. And that's a really big ask. As I look at it, and I've listened to the experts talk and listened to the community talk, it just keeps coming back to me. You know, the ball don't lie, but sometimes there's instant replay, or sometimes there's overtime. Something else can come into play. And I know that we haven't raised the funds, but I don't know that we as a city, we have made an even extra effort on behalf of these residents. I hate to bring in sports, now I'm going to bring in the home improvement. I like to hang wallpaper, and there's an old saying about measuring twice and cutting once. I don't know that we've measured twice yet. I don't know that we have actually become aspirational on behalf of our residents. Looking at the history of what's happened here at Bingham Park. 1922, and we know what happened then, and the landfill, then the park on top of it. Against all the good ideas that the residents had, we didn't really do them any justice, in my opinion, and injustice for me, to not take one more swing at it. I'm sorry, it's a bad metaphor. Another swing at it. You know, we have a new city manager here, and there's a possibility of directing our city manager to develop a plan. Now, I recognize, you know, and from my questions earlier, you know, how long does this money last? Can it be staged? Can it be staged in contracts? We don't want to encumber future councils. All that stuff can be factored in. You know, are we gambling on the health and safety? We've gambled for 15 years. 3, 4, 6 more months of an analysis that may bring us back, but an analysis that digs in and is aspirational and tries to find the answer, tries to get us to yes. We may not get there. We don't always get there, but if you try to get there, then you have an opportunity to make a real difference, that this park can be fully remediated. I just think about, pulling the toxic soil from the stream and throwing it on top and then putting the 12-inch, and we can walk on it, and, you can run, but you can't cut. You can't make a cut on it because that's going to dig into it. And is it really a park? It might be a solution, but it's not really a park that you can play at. You can go across the street, you can go over to some other place. So that's where I'm thinking. I'm thinking that that we have an opportunity here to, on a short-term basis at least, be aspirational. Measure twice, measure 3 times maybe, because I think the members of the community deserve that. Again, we may come back to the very same decision that all we have is 18 million and it's going to cost 43. By God, we can't find it. But I think we owe it to ourselves to make that extra step. And I know that I'm looking at our new city manager here. I'm sure he's probably not reveling at the idea of having an additional task. But I think it's worth it. I think it's worth that opportunity.
I'm going to have to say something. I think your comments are implying that we haven't been doing.
No. Please, no. Well, let me just straighten that out.
Let me finish.
Okay.
Because you're
and then I'll
talking
go.
about being aspirational and looking at all different ways to get money. What do you think we've been doing the last couple of years? I mean, the work has been done.
So,
And Madam Mayor, to that point, a lot of work has been done. But given where we are, we have a new city manager here, we have more ideas. Let's take a little bit of time, measuring twice, measuring 3 times, to make sure that we can't find any more money anywhere. In other projects that we have that maybe haven't expended the funds, it may even happen within the next 30, 40, 60 days that maybe that manna falls from heaven and additional funding will come up, and we will have made that aspirational opportunity. Not that it's guaranteed to happen, but there's an opportunity. Some might call it gambling, but I think it's gambling for the right reason.
No.
so Madam Mayor.
Well, can Mary Kay, then you? Okay.
No, go ahead, Mary Kay. No.
Madam Mayor, could you also add Councilmember Thurm to that list?
Thank you.
I just want to say, Dr. Wells, Mayor Pro Tem, I'm sure Mayor Vaughn, we were all extremely active when the White Street landfill came up. How many years ago? 15. We've been talking about landfills and how to remediate and how to make sure that no more nasty waste is taken through a neighborhood. And it's been going, I know I've been involved with them since the 90s. And to say that we need to kick this can down the road some more, I just can't deal with that, because I'm telling you what, if this were to get tabled today, it'd be another 20 years before it's brought up again. It's been 20 years since it has been brought up, because there was contamination there that we knew about, or, we knew that it had been a landfill for many years. So if we could do this and then look for that 43 million or whatever it is, if we can do something to make sure, even think about all these truckloads of contamination going through the Bingham Park neighborhood. Think about it. You heard him say the dust is going to have to be measured. The dust is going to have to be tested. The dust that comes out of there. Because as we all know, for instance, and I know Dr. Wells knows, the Mayor Pro Tem knows, That's why CEEJ was founded, to make sure that like all these trucks coming out of these places did not have more contamination to the community. So if we can cap and cover now, and if we can start looking for, with the community's help and with the corporations' help and with everyone's help, to figure out a way to do full remediation. Technology is changing every single day. And it just baffles me to sit here and say, we haven't done anything. And I know Sharon has spent day and night and day trying to find a good solution. You know, my kids used to play basketball and football at Bingham Park, working, being in the different recreation leagues. They were there. And now to find out that we haven't done anything, that just baffles me. Go ahead, Sharon.
And Tammy also wants to, so Sharon, then Tammy.
Well, if Tammy wants to.
All right, Tammy?
Yeah, I just want to say that I think it's disingenuous of us to kick this can down the road. I think it's unfair of us to kick this can down the road. I think it's absolutely fine for us to continue to ask Phil and the city manager to look for other additional sources of money in the next 60, 90, and however long from now until this project is complete. But I know since I've been on council 7 years that Councilwoman Hightower, Dr. Wells, and city staff have been trying to address this situation and turn over every stone and every option they could find. I don't know that delaying this I don't believe that delaying this 60 days is going to magically make us find some money. When we look at $30 million that we need to raise, that's the equivalent of raising our property taxes 10 cents to cover that. I mean, that's huge. And we certainly don't have the ability to find, quote, $30 million, in our budget this year or next year or really any year. We have got so many demands that, I just don't think it's realistic. I think we can continue to look for money, but I don't think it's realistic. And I think we have to give credit where credit is due to Councilwoman Hightower, Dr. Wells, and our staff for finding and raising the funds that we've found. I would love nothing more, and I really would like to do full remediation. But I think at this point, something is better than nothing. We can't leave this property just sit as is for another how many years. And as I said earlier, I'm very concerned about the election, whether it be federal, state, or city council elections upcoming, of what changes could be happening. And this go, as others have said, for another decade or two before it's addressed. Option A is not the ideal. My ideal would be option B, but for now, given the constraints of where we are now, I think we have to go with I think I have to vote for option A.
Sharon?
So, I want to say, you all are right. This has been something that I've wanted to make sure we get done for our community. And I thought it was in sight earlier in the year when we said we found a way, but we were going to use White Street. But the community pushed back, and we heard that, and we understood that, and we respected that. And I said to staff, we got to go back and find another way. We got to go back and check the numbers. We have been I have been very aspirational. I appreciate everyone saying that, my colleagues knowing that, but I wasn't doing it for accolades. I was doing it because I watched somebody cry about not having a park in the community. And so the goal was to get money to make that happen. Well, to the mayor's point, we put Bingham Park on our legislative agenda. That had never been done. We put it both at the state level and the federal level. We asked for $39 million, and guess what we got? We got 11, and we got 1. Now, we can sit here and we can wait 20 more years to get another 11 and another 1, but we're going to still be where we are with not being able to get anything done at all. Phil, I believe if we go with our full remediation, do we lose any of NCDEQ's money? Or will they continue to still have that money for us?
Do you mean the $7 million? I mean, that depends on when the project begins.
Right.
And other projects that other communities are doing.
So we hear 18 today. We may hear 12 tomorrow. And we lose that. And y'all, I'm afraid of what's about to happen in our state and in our federal government. That if things don't go right, we don't have anybody listening to our concerns at all. And then where are we? Who will help us as we push forward to get the money for Bingham Park? But if we let this money expire, what does it say to our state representatives? You gave us money, we didn't use it. They'll say, well, okay, why should we give you any more? That's what I'm afraid of that could happen. I'm afraid of what may happen up here. It may not be a concern about Bingham Park. I know you want full remediation. I do too. I hear you, Mr. Brandon. I get it. But we now are here at a table. Yes, I do hear you. But I also know that you're 84. I don't want to be that either and still sit here and still be talking about not getting this for the community. And for somebody to be back crying about not having any kind of park at all. And at least Plan A, while it's not always the ultimate that we want, gives us a start. There is nothing that stops us from advocating and pushing for more funding, more money to get remediation done at Bingham Park, even though it would be cap and cover. And yeah, I get we want a tree. I want a tree too. But we can have that park just right in eyesight of Hampton. I never imagined when I got the school system to give us Hampton. They gave it to us. That we would have this option on the table. You never know why the stars line up the way they do. You just don't know. And so at least in this way, we get a park, and it's still going to take us, what, a year or more before we could even begin. And then we still got to haul dump loads of dirt out of the area. You don't want to have a big hole in a ground for 1 or 2 years when you can, right now, we can start something that we won't have a big hole in the ground. We can have a park. And we'll have amenities in that park. I get what you're saying. I know you'll be mad. I'm not playing politics. Not going to play politics. Okay? I'm not going to do that. Okay? I just got to lay it on the line. I'm not. I understand you may be mad at me, and I suffer the consequences. I live with that because I'm God's child, and I'm okay because I believe in doing what's right. And to do this at this moment is what we need to do. This staff and this man right here has only been back here with us 1.5 years. He has dedicated so much time to finding a solution to this because he didn't want to impact and hurt the community either by using White Street. He did not. He just simply said, we want to give them something. And that's all he wanted to do. That's the same as I am. I just wanted to give you something. Everybody that I could get to listen to me, Zach included, I said, we need money. So I just want you all to understand, I know what you think, and I know what you're saying, but I'm not unempathetic to your cause.
Sharon, do you want to make a motion?
Yes. I would like to make that motion to use Resolution A.
Second.
So that has moved and seconded. Council, please vote. Oops. I don't have a...
Look what I got on mine. Kamala Harris, the news.
Madam Mayor, I'm not allowed to vote. I'm not able to vote online. I'm a yes.
Yeah, and I don't have a vote screen. I'm a yes.
Vote screen.
I'm not sure why it's not showing up on your screen, but if you want to do a voice vote down, I can plug it in. It's on mine.
Okay. Mrs. Hightower? Voice vote.
Yes.
Mr. Holston?
No.
Mr. Matheny? Yes. Mrs. Abusawader?
Yes.
I'm a yes.
Yes.
And Mrs. Thurm?
Yes.
So that passes 6-2. Okay. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I have a motion.
We still have a...
Madam Mayor, I have a motion
Yes.
to read. Thank you so much. Madam Mayor, I would like to move to increase the city attorney's salary by $2,000 a month, effective 10/31/2024, for a total salary of $315,670. This increase is for additional compensation duties to increase responsibilities such as managing the MWBE office and managing the lobbying responsibilities as well.
Second.
I guess we'll do a voice vote. Sharon?
Yes.
Hugh?
Yes.
Zach? Mary Kay?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Yes. Goldie? Yes. And Tammy?
Yes.
And that passes 8-0. Is there a second? Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. That passes. Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you.